Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, April 25th, 2022. I will call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Before we get into the agenda items, I just wanted to remind council and for our viewers at home that starting today, as per the Municipal Government Act, that the motions will not be recorded for or against or carried or defeated. So there'll be no recording of names in the minutes of who voted in favor, or unless prior to the vote being called, a member of council can request that the vote be recorded. So for people that are watching from home, you'll see that being changed now, but you can still go back to the YouTube video and watch to see who voted for what, and then it's also time stamped so you can go back and find the information that way. Okay, moving on to item 1.1, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. For myself, I will be abstaining from discussions or voting regarding agenda item 7.4. I have a family member, a nephew that's involved in that business, so Deputy Mayor Aby will take over that agenda item for me. With that being said, the agenda is being circulated. Are there any additions, deletions? See none. Can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated? Councillor Pickering. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 3.1, adoption of the previous minutes from our April 11th, 2022 meeting. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to approve the regular council meetings from April 11th, 2022 as circulated? Councillor Beekman. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Robin Hepher. Robin, if you want to come take a seat at the presentation table, please. Robin is from the Chinook Arch Library, and he's going to be giving us update as to what's going on. So we have a PowerPoint. Lana, is the mouse going to work for Robin, or do we? Okay. Here.
Testing. It's good. Okay, it doesn't come through. Okay. So yes, my name is Robin Hepher. I'm the CEO of Chinook Arch Regional Library System. I've been with the system since 2007, and I've been the director for about 7 years now. And it's my pleasure to come and provide an update on our activities over the last little while. Typically after every municipal election, I come out and I bring my little dog and pony show to all of our member councils, of which there are now 41. So it takes a little while to get out and present to every council, but yeah, for those that are new on council, it just gives you an idea of what Chinook Arch is and how we fit into your local library service. And for those who have seen me here before, I do recognize a few faces. It's just an update on what we've been up to over the last 4 years and what's been happening in the world of public libraries. So let me see here. That's kind of one of our update, or sort of our summary impact reports. I'm wondering if I can move this ahead here. And I might need help already. One more. There we go. Okay, so we can go. Okay. Perfect, thank you. So what is Chinook Arch? So we are a member-driven library service organization. Our main purpose is to serve your community and your library. So we primarily exist to provide a framework for all of the libraries in southwestern Alberta. You can sort of see a map there. We kind of cover the southwestern corner of the province. Yeah, and we basically are a framework which allows municipalities to collaborate on the delivery of library services. And that allows for economies of scale and basically means that no matter where you live in southwestern Alberta, you can expect a relatively high level of public library service. We started in 1992. At that time, Chinook, or this corner of the province was the only area that was not served by a public library, was served by many public libraries, but was not served by a regional library system. And so in the late 80s, there was a steering committee that was struck from some library boards, and they decided to start exploring the possibility of bringing regional library service into the area. And they developed a plan of service. And in 1992, 22 councils signed on to that. And since then, we have grown to 41 member municipalities and 1 school authority, which is the Kainai Board of Education. So, so yeah, that's basically sort of the backstory. This is our 30th anniversary this year. We're quite excited about that. We're having a bit of a celebration at the end of this week to mark that occasion. Next. So, as I mentioned, or made reference to earlier, so the Chinook provides a framework for municipalities to collaborate, even though it's an agreement that municipalities sign on to, and so the agreement basically lays out the general roles of the system board and the local library board, and that's how we sort of differentiate the roles. The agreement is very broad and very general, and in fact, the agreement that had been originally signed in 1992 had been in place up until 2021, and so we didn't have to make any adjustments to that agreement. We did. Perhaps the council will recall the revised agreement coming across your table in 2021. We had to change the agreement because of the changes in the way that municipal affairs, or the government of Alberta, counts population. So. As you know, that you probably know that used to reside with municipal affairs, has now moved over to Treasury Board and Finance, and so our agreement made specific reference to municipal affairs, and so we had to update our agreement. Anyway, because the agreement is very broad, we intermittently go out and poll our members and ask them what their needs are for the coming 4 years, and then that goes into a plan of service. And so the plan of service basically takes those broadly defined service roles from the agreement and kind of puts more precision on it. It gives us direction on how to spend our resources and how we can best support your local library. We do everything because we're so closely affiliated with municipal cycles. Most of our members are elected officials, and your appointee to the board is Councillor Saylor here. Hi, Jordan. And so, so everything we do is pretty much tied to municipal cycles, including budgeting, planning, and reporting. So our current plan of service we're just in the final year of our plan of service. So we're currently in the process of doing a needs assessment and talking to our members and asking them what they would like to see in their what kind of support they would like over the next 4 years or so. Next slide. So our funding, this chart, its annual budget is about $4 million. The bulk of which comes from member governed, member driven, and primarily member funded as well. So the large red chunk is the municipal levy. Every member pays that whether they have a library board or not. Some municipalities do operate a library board, and those library boards also have an additional differential fee of $357 per capita. And that's just to acknowledge the fact that when Chinook was formed, it took some of the tasks that the local librarian was doing and centralized them. So there was a fee that was established for that. This is long before I was at Chinook even. The big purple chunk there is the operating grant from the government of Alberta, and this is one of the main reasons why a group of communities might get together and form a library system, is that it actually brings an extra layer of granting into the system. So that purple chunk represents about $1 million that's available for public library services in this corner of the province that wouldn't otherwise be there. So it's a significant chunk of money, and it really helps us to just provide additional services to your community. Next slide. By the way, if there are any questions, feel free to flag me down, and I'm happy to answer any either during my presentation or after. So as I mentioned, we have a fairly large board. It's a one member, one vote model. So every member municipality has representation at our board, which makes for a large board of 42 people. Many of the members, as I mentioned, are elected officials, but sometimes the municipality will also appoint a chair of the local library board or just an interested citizen that is interested in libraries and wants to get involved. Since the board is quite large, it only meets 3 times a year, and as a result, a lot of the work ends up being done in our various standing committees. So we have a fairly typical roster of standing committees that review all the policies and get them ready for approval by the board. Next slide. We'll just give you a quick rundown on some of the services that we provide. We have a facility in Lethbridge that we're based out of, but a lot of our staff spend quite a bit of time out in the libraries, actually providing some on-the-ground help. Each year we spend about $1 million on library materials. That's rounding up a amount. We can get a very deep discount on those materials. So basically extends your local library's collection budget by about 40%, which is significant. Yeah, and then so the items, we order them, they come to us, we put the stickers on them, we put all the labels and then put them in our vans and then send them out to your local library. So that frees up your librarian to focus more on frontline services rather than kind of the less value-added stuff behind the scenes of putting stickers on books. We run a substantial IT network, so all of the libraries are networked over the Alberta SuperNet, and we run a lot of services on that network. The main one is the system that checks books in and out. But also we provide email, we provide online, remote file storage for your library. We run the firewalls and all of the threat protection and anything basically that is required for running a substantial network. All the battery backup and everything like that is hosted by Chinook, in addition to your local library's website. We have a group of librarians that work at Chinook, and their whole job is just to help your librarian and your library board with any aspect of running a library. So even running a small library this day and age is quite a complex task. It involves governance questions, operational questions, collection development questions, financial questions, human resource related questions, and Coaldale's a larger community. In fact, Coaldale is the 3rd largest community in Chinook. But if you're out in Champion or Arrowwood in a small community of 100 people, it's hard to find that expertise sometimes. So that's what Chinook can provide, just by simply an email or a phone call. Hey, Dothan. I invited Dothan, your local librarian, to come down in case you had any questions about your local library service. So we work very closely together on a lot of this stuff. So. I promised her she wouldn't have to say anything if she didn't, but. So yeah, and the digital services. So as you're likely aware, a lot of reading happens online these days, so people can download audiobooks and ebooks from various services. Well, your library's in that game as well, and so these services, which are relatively expensive, we can, by collaborating, provide those to your patrons. And in fact, I have a couple of stats here. So in 2021, Coaldale residents downloaded about 20,000 items from some of our online services. So people out there are reading. People find it convenient, especially when traveling, to read these digital resources. And so we have to provide that to our patrons. Delivery is a big one. So we have 2 vans that go out every day, and they move items from library to library. So if you live in Coaldale, the book you want is held in Fort Macleod or Pincher Creek or Claresholm. You just simply place a hold on it, and our vans will go out, pick up the item, and bring it to your home library where you can go and check it out. And you return it to your home library, and our vans take it back to the owning library. So in 2021, we moved 720,000 items around the system. So people are still reading, they're still watching stuff, and they still are using their local library. And those numbers aren't quite back to pre-pandemic times, but we're getting pretty close. In 2020. Obviously, COVID-19 had a huge impact on libraries. Libraries are an inherently public building, and so we weren't sure exactly how to deal with welcoming people into the library, and we were shut down for a while and everything like that. So in 2020, our deliveries were down to about 450,000, but they're bouncing back quite rapidly. So people are coming back to the library, which is great. And the last thing that we do is in-library programming. This is something we're just starting to explore a bit more, but it takes a lot of resources to develop programs in the library. It's very labor-intensive and can be expensive as well. So Chinook has the resources to start developing programs that can be deployed across the system. And yeah, so that's that's sort of a quick rundown of the services that we provide to your local library board and residents. Just a couple highlights. I've already touched on some of these, so I won't cover them again in the interest of time. One thing I'll mention is we're exploring a bit of automation. So we have a couple of communities that don't enjoy library service, and there are barriers to setting up library service. And one of those is Waterton, and the other one is Pecuniary Nation. So we have set up, using grant money, what's called a book locker. So it's basically an automated lending service and a delivery pickup location. So if you live in Brockett, you can get to Fort McLeod or Pincher Creek to place a hold on your item. You can actually have it delivered right to your home community, and then just go down, scan your library card, and then pick up the item from this. It essentially looks like a large vending machine or refrigerator or something like that. And we've also have an online sign-up service. So if you live in Brockett or Waterton and you don't have a library card, you just go on the website, sign up for a free library card, and you can have stuff delivered to your community starting that very instant. Yeah, so I think that's maybe all I will cover there. I think I have one more slide, so looking forward. So as I mentioned, we do everything kind of on a 4-year cycle. So we're in the process of our needs assessment, which will lead to development of a new plan of service for 2023 and 2023 through 2026. Our plan of service always informs our budget development as well. And so when our board develops a new budget, if it entails a change to the levy schedule, that has to be approved by member councils. So it may well be, if there is a change to the proposed levy schedule, that there be a memo sent to councils, likely in the fall, asking for your approval. In order for the budget to be approved or the levy schedule to be approved, it has to be approved by 2/3 of councils representing 2/3 of the population that we serve. So it's kind of a supermajority situation. Yeah, and I think that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to pass them to Dothlin.
Thank you, Robin. So I'll open it up to council for any questions for either Robin or Dothlin. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Robin, thank you for the presentation. I really like that the micro library or library idea. Is there potential more of that on the horizon? Is this kind of like a litmus test to see the success of it?
It is, to some extent, just kind of a proof of concept. There are a few communities where I think it would make sense to do that, and one of them is Nobleford. So Nobleford just joined Chinook at the end of 2021, but they don't have a library service of their own. So the tricky thing is that they're fairly expensive. It's about a $40,000 capital purchase. And so far we've been able to get grant money to do that, but it's tricky to take money that we receive from councils like yourself that is designed to serve, your community, and then spend a big chunk of money serving just one specific. So, but it does seem that funders, grant providers like the concept, and so far we've been able to get grant funding. So, yeah, good question though. Thank you.
Well, Dothlin, just one sec. You have to slide the mic over, please.
If council would like us to look into the possibility of adding one in Coaldale, that's something we can show. I guess maybe on the north side. So, yeah.
Okay, great question. Any other questions for either of our panel guests? So Dothlin, now that we have Robin here, is there anything here that they could be doing better for us in Coaldale?
Oh, that's a good one. No, Chinook Arch, they have been tremendously supportive of the library, and I think especially, I don't know, I think Coaldale is special because we bother them a lot. But the staff, they're very supportive and respond.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Robin.
you.
I will say you do have a very excellent and well-used library with innovative approach to service, such as sharing the space with the community literacy, CLC. I never keep track of how many CLs there are in there, but yeah, and you've got a great librarian in Dothlin. She's always thinking innovatively, and we're very happy to work with Coaldale Library Board and the.
Okay, well, I see no more questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to both of you for showing up today and sharing with us. Two quick questions. One, with regards to the levies, does that take place after every year, or are we looking at a 3-year cycle or 4-year cycle on the levy process?
We typically send out a proposed 4-year levy, and that's simply because, well, some municipalities, but mainly the municipality of Lethbridge or the city of Lethbridge, they do everything on a 4-year cycle. So if you make a 1-year request, and you come back in year 2, they've already set their budget for 4 years, and you're kind of out of luck if you are wanting to request an increase.
And
So-
the levy is based on that census from that time. So if we've grown, a little bit or whatever the number might be, you don't use those current numbers. You use the previous numbers.
We use whatever the most current numbers are as published by the government of Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, some communities are, as you likely have discussed, the new population figures are quite different from the old population figures. I think for us, they went down by about 2% overall. So some communities went up quite dramatically and some went down quite dramatically. So I'm hoping that they'll sort of stabilize, but it kind of remains to be seen.
With regards to programming, Laughlin's done a tremendous job with doing some programming plus events and special, events where you're identifying the library to a large extent. Your focus on programming and funding for programming, does that go down to our, like, say, Coaldale, or does that just stay within Chinook Arch?
The model we have used to this point is we've hired the staff that actually deliver the programs. So a Chinook Arch staff person would go to Coaldale Library or any of the other libraries and deliver the program in the library. So it doesn't require any additional work, at least not much additional work on the part of the local library staff. They just sort of prepare the space and we show up and deliver the program.
Okay.
One other thing I maybe just mentioned about the
Yes.
levies is we did roll our levy back by 5% when COVID hit, and just because there was a lot of unknowns and municipalities were experiencing some hardships themselves. And I will say we're aware of the situation with municipalities and how certain costs are being downloaded onto municipalities for things like policing and various other things, and revenue is taking a bit of a hit as well. So we're definitely cognizant of that as a board as we prepare our next proposed levy schedule. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much to both of you for coming out, and appreciate the update. It was very thorough. So we look forward to working with you lots in the future. So
Sounds great. If you do want us to come back and speak to the proposed levy schedule, happy to do that as well. So
Okay.
appreciate your time this evening.
thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Dothan. Okay, we have a public hearing taking place at 5:30, so I'm just going to jump ahead on the schedule to agenda item 8.3, the Town of Coaldale Signing Authority. And we have our Chief Financial Officer, Kyle Beauchamp, is going to present.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. So in front of you today is a update to the Town of Coaldale Signing Authority. So some background on this is that the town generally has 4 authorized representatives on signing authority for the Town of Coaldale. This is largely related to contracts and financial matters for the Town of Coaldale, kind of under the corporate services umbrella. Currently, we have the Mayor Jack Van Rijn, Kaylin Hastings, myself, and Spencer Croyle as signing authorities. Where Spencer Croyle no longer with the organization. We're simply just looking to remove Spencer Croyle and adding Kevin McKeown, the other deputy CAO, as the 4th member for the town signing authority. With that being said, we're just looking for a motion from the town council to remove Spencer Croyle and if council agrees to add Kevin McKieran as signing authority for the town of Colio. And I'll turn that back to council for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for our CFO? Councillor Chapman.
As proposed, that council authorize the following individuals, Mayor Jack Van Rijn, CAO Kaylin Hastings, Kyle Beauchamp, our CFO and Deputy CAO, and Kevin McEwen as Director of Protective Services and Deputy CAO for signing authority.
Any further questions? Can I call the question on that? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're just going to jump ahead to agenda item 12.1 under information items. We have the Green Acres Foundation report to the community for 2021. Is there any questions, comments on that correspondence? Okay, and then also 12.2 under information, we have our council strategic plan for 2021-2025. That was presented by Tracy Lawrenson that worked with us at our strat planning back in January. Any questions or comments on that document? Okay, with that being said, could I get someone to receive items 12.1 and 12.2 as information? Councillor Saylor, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we have a public hearing that's coming up under regarding agenda item 6.1 regarding the area structure plan bylaw 844-P-03-22 regarding the West Industrial Area Structure Plan, and bylaw 845-P-03-22 regarding the West Industrial Area rezoning. I'll call the public hearing to order at 5:28 p.m. The purpose, let me just back up. The purpose of this public hearing is to present council for consideration of two related bylaws which received first readings at the March 25th, 2022 regular meeting of council. Bylaw 844-P-03-22 for the establishment of an area structure plan allowing for the expansion of the Coaldale Industrial Park to the west of its existing boundary, and bylaw 845-P-03-22 which deals with rezoning of certain lands within the area structure plan. And in the gallery this evening, do we have anybody here speaking for or against the proposal? Okay, thank you, Kirk. We're just going to give you a sign-in form for that, okay, please? So, Kirk, this is going to be for your benefit. My name is Jack Van Rijn, and I will be chairing this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through myself. Addressed to the chair will be Mayor Van Rijn. And just some public hearing procedures. That council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is the subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon by myself as chair. Each presenter must state his or her full name, their address, and their interest in the matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. And then presenters are to stay within a suggested 5-minute time limit on the presentation, and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to point and refrain from restating points raised by any other speakers. If any new information comes out of tonight's materials, you will be required to email a copy to our municipal clerk. At this time, I would like to ask our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, to introduce the subject matter of this public hearing. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, Council. It's a pleasure to be here today to speak about the proposed area structure plan and rezoning bylaws that are before you. If I may just confirm. If perhaps you could just scroll to the portion, no, staff report. Yeah, I was just looking for a map. Great. So the West Industrial Area Structure Plan has been in the process of being developed over the last several months for properties located within the quarter section known as northwest of 14, 9, 20 West 4. And this is the quarter section which lies directly to the west of the adjacent Coaldale Industrial Park. And the plan is being proposed principally by a landowner within the center of that quarter section, 845 Developments, and their representative is here with us today, as well as their consultants, planning and engineering consultants, who have an opportunity to speak to council with respect to the plan that has been prepared. Their consultant, ISL, working from a planning perspective with respect to the plan, has prepared the following. So they've undertaken with preliminary meetings with town administration to go over things like the town's municipal development plan and other pertinent documents. And following that, they provided for preliminary concepts for review, and following that engaged in execution of public engagement opportunities, which took place largely throughout the winter of 2021 into 2022, and then finally prepared the finalized draft ASP for administrative review and presentation to council, which is the version of the plan that was presented for first reading at the March 28th, 2022 meeting of council. An overview of the components of the plan was included in administration's initial presentation to council at the March 28th meeting. I won't repeat what was prepared there. However, that staff report is an attachment to this one. And I will allow for the 845 Developments and their representatives to go over the plan in greater detail with council and provide council with the opportunity to speak directly with them with respect to the details of that plan. As far as the plan's integration into the town's broader planning framework, it's the opinion of administration that the plan as presented really meets the spirit and intent of the overarching planning documents, in particular the municipal development plan, along with specific provisions governing development listed within the plan. So specifically the municipal development plan, which was adopted by bylaw in September of 2020, and that was after a period of 2 years of public consultation, rigorous public consultation, I should say, including a significant number of surveys, open houses, and so on. That plan identifies specifically this area as the growth node for industrial uses within the town. And in addition for that, calls for the development of an area structure plan reflecting the same. And in fact, the area is also contemplated as part of the town's annexation documents. So the town began the process of looking to expand its borders and annex land from the county, which included this parcel of land, and this parcel of land was specifically annexed and identified for the purpose of accommodating future industrial growth. And that annexation was completed in 2018, again after a long period that involved significant public consultation. Once the draft plan in its existing form was completed, we circulated the document both internally and externally. So we provided a copy of the plan to all departments within the town and asked for their input and their guidance with respect to any issues that they felt might arise. Only the emergency services and operations components of the organization saw fit to bring any points up, and their concerns were just with respect to asking questions about the cul-de-sacs. We do have 3 cul-de-sacs shown in the plan, and they identified at that time, obviously, their preference to avoid using those where possible due to the difficulty of turning larger equipment around in them. And what we identified, or what we communicated back to them at that point, was to say that the transportation framework with respect to something as specific as a cul-de-sac placement is not intended to suggest necessarily a permanence. So for example, the existing 12th Avenue within the industrial park has a cul-de-sac at the exit of it, and now that the plan contemplates expansion of that road to the west to connect to the 845, that cul-de-sac will be replaced with a road that will continue forward. And so the concept here is to suggest that the cul-de-sacs exist so as to not suggest a requirement for connection either to the south or to the north. However, with future planning stages, particularly with respect to the development of an outline plan where a traffic impact assessment is completed and further engineering studies are provided, if a secondary access to Highway 845, for example, is identified, particularly as a requirement of Alberta transportation, then the opportunity to explore the connection point to one of the avenues to the north or south of the plan will be open for the town's consideration and the potential redevelopment of that road at that time. Also provided for circulation externally to both Lethbridge County and to Alberta Transportation. Lethbridge County identified no concerns with the plan. Alberta Transportation, in fact, noted that the plan area will access Highway 845, and strictly from their point of view, the area structure plan will provide for the orderly and efficient development of the plan area. And to that end, the document reflects sound planning principles and development strategies. The document is also well organized and thoroughly addresses all of the issues that are pertinent when establishing a framework for the subsequent subdivision and development within the plan area. Alberta Transportation did provide some suggestions for minor textual amendments with respect to some of the language used, particularly in a section with respect to the outline plan, and that can be easily accommodated with a minor text amendment. The area structure plan and rezoning were also posted through the town's public engagement platform, which is Let's Connect Coaldale. And at the time of the drafting of the report, only one comment was received, stating the following. I'm not against it, which is to say the plan, but between this new development and the planned leisure center and school, serious consideration needs to be made to the traffic situation on 20th Street and Highway 845, either traffic lights or a severe reduction in the 50 km/h speed limit, and serious enforcements. Perhaps a rerouting of trucks is also in order. To that effect, I would suggest that a number of those issues will be addressed as part of the more detailed engineering associated with that traffic impact assessment and the results that come from that. There was also an additional comment which was received late, and I'll just provide that for council now. Many of us living in the south end of this quarter along 14th have concerns about dust and dirt, traffic and noise. The industrial activity already in place can be heard outside of the residential bylaw hours, and would like to know what special considerations are there and how will they be addressed for the close proximity to homes. And that was received on Friday. So in preparation for the public hearing and in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, the public hearing was advertised for 2 weeks in the Sunny South News in the April 12th and April 19th editions. Notification of the public hearing was likewise forwarded to properties within and surrounding the plan area. We also did receive some correspondence from Mr. Beller, who's here today. Is it Baylor? Baylor. Very good. He's here today and wanted to speak to council directly with respect to his concerns, and we'll provide him the opportunity to do so. From that perspective, broadly speaking, we believe the area structure plan does meet the policy direction of the town plan and the other associated plans. And council now has the opportunity to address the proponent of the plan as well as his consulting experts with respect to whether or not the plan adequately addresses the requirements of the town and the feedback received from the community during the plan development process, including feedback raised at this public hearing process. And council may also consider whether the plan adequately addresses concerns discussed as part of the initial presentation of the plan, and may ask questions of both proponent and administration relating to those concerns, including concerns raised with respect to options for screening, which were brought up initially at the for the southern portion of the development area. And then, following the public hearing, if council does believe the plan and associated bylaws in their current form are worth consideration, and if only minor textual amendments may be required, then council may wish to proceed with second and third readings of the bylaws subsequent to the public hearing. And if council wishes to see the proponent make more significant alterations to the proposal to address concerns raised at the public hearing, then council may wish to provide the proponent with direction to that effect in order to be considered in order to consider an amended version of the plan for second and third reading at a later date. And at this point, I will suggest that the proponent and the various people here to speak along with the proponent would be able to provide council with a more detailed analysis of the plan. And following that, I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions council might have.
Okay, thank you. So before we open it up, is there any questions from council for Cameron right now? Okay. Seeing none, is there anybody here that wishes to speak for or against the proposal? Kirk, if you want to take a seat, and you can come sit at the table, please. You'll need to have the microphone and have it nice and close. And then just for the public record, could I get you to state your full name, your address, your interest in this matter, including whether you are in support or non-support, please?
My full name is Kirk Baylor, B-E-L-E-R. I live at 405 Middlelark Drive, Lethbridge County. I and a partner of mine through our various corporate entities are the owners of basically the strip of property that runs along the southern boundary of the area in question.
So Kirk, I'm just going to ask our municipal clerk to pull up that map again, please. Go ahead, Kirk.
So even though I'm going to be speaking against both bylaws, that has to be brought into a context. So even, I should say, I'm speaking against it in the form it currently is. And as a bit of background, is that originally myself and my partner purchased the entire 20 acres that ran along the strip of that, which included the house, which used to be, I think, Bill's house for Bill Electric, and then all the farmland he had behind there. And we bought that prior to the annexation. And to be honest, we bought it for speculation because we realized that once that land was brought into the town, that it might have some use there. And my partner and I saw Coaldale as a prime place to put our investment dollars. We saw it as a town with a good workforce, with what we viewed as a business-friendly council, and with competitive tax rates, and also aware that the town had made a decision to move towards a reallocation of its tax base from residential to try and move it to more commercial, industrial, and so forth. And so we thought, okay, great, this is a good place to do it. So when we first bought it, we ended up selling the house to somebody else because we didn't need that. And then eventually we actually sold an additional parcel to what's called Live Electric, which is the former Bill's Electric. So the acreage area, we expanded that by 0.4 of an acre, and then we sold 3.5 acres to Bill's Electric, or pardon me, Live Electric. And the intention at that time, and I'm not speaking for Live Electric, but we were told that they were looking for access to the planned 14th Avenue. And when we purchased this property too, in our investigations, there wasn't much in terms of development at that point because the town boundary ended at 14th Street. The town has already spent a significant amount of money putting in the services along there, outlining the road access there. So it would seem, and we actually met, I think, with Spencer Croyle originally to talk about this and talk about, well, get moving on development and when would a road go in? Because it seems strange that this road has sat empty for decades, although it gets used a lot. Technically not a road. I invite any of the council members to drive by there and look, and you'll see that it's used very frequently by the members of the owners, the residents of the station grounds, I believe it's called. A lot of people use it to access what looks like an alley, but I think it's supposed to be 16th Street. And at one time, it was actually used relatively frequently to access into the industrial park until the town put up a barrier and put up some no throwaway signs there. Although people ignore that, and they just drive across our land and around the town's the town's fence. I point that out simply to point out that even its current form, it's used. And it's used a lot. It's in demand. And so when we bought this, we expected, in our meeting with Spencer Coyle, was, yeah, that was going to happen at some point. We invested a significant amount of money into our future and based on what we saw the town's future as being. Now, when the area structure plan, or let me go back to our initial meeting with Spencer Coyle, is that at that time it was suggested, okay, well, we could put forward a private ASP exactly as the current owners have done. Or he suggested we could simply wait until the town was ready to move in on that and we can incorporate it together, and there'd be cost savings in that. And we're very appreciative of his position on that because that's great. Now we advanced a few years and we got the new area structure plan. And I have to say from the very outset, I'm very grateful to the town and to your staff's kind of position to say, you know what, we shouldn't just do an area structure plan for the center portion. It should be for the whole portion. It makes a lot of sense. But when the area structure plan started, the private one, a copy of it was sent in advance to my business partner. And sort of like, hey, what do you think about this? And we're like, well, our first comment was that they had the property boundaries off because they weren't aware of where the land was that was sold, so they had to move that road over. But our first thought was, okay, well, wait a minute. On the southeast corner, that's a pretty big chunk of land that's going to be flooded, which would be our land. And I said, well, you know, we've had no conversation with anybody on that. We did have my partner had a brief conversation with one of the principals of the development. Not actually, I don't think, I'm not sure who actually is at 845, but basically, you know, Dennis from Dennis Dirt Work. And there was some discussion about maybe some land swap, but nothing really final and kind of left in the open. So we just kind of thought this is all preliminary. Carried on, because you would think that if somebody's going to advance an area structure plan, which involves taking a significant portion of someone else's land, that those people would be actively involved in that planning. And how would you feel if you came home one day and your neighbor said, oh, by the way, I'm putting a pool in your backyard? You know, and then suddenly find out it's actually at second reading because we didn't get notice. And there's two addresses in play. One would be the address for land titles that's registered. Another would be the address that is used on the corporation that the land is held in. And the address for the corporation comes to me, and the address for land titles goes to my business partner. Like, I didn't get one. I did go speak to the owner of the acreage, the gentleman we sold the acreage to, and asked him, did you get a letter? He goes, yeah, I got some letter a long time ago, but he didn't think it was actually in regard to anything current. So I am concerned about notice. I'm concerned about consultation. And I'm more concerned about future development of that land and the plan and how it affects me. I haven't had a chance to even speak with the developers. We have arranged a first initial meeting for tomorrow, something that you think should have happened months ago. Our biggest concern right now, because we're not anti-development, I think putting this land into active use is going to be good for the town long-term. Attract businesses, attract employment, get tax revenue, it's good. But I encourage the town, Mr. Mayor, to realize that even though you do have a public engagement consultation bylaw in effect, and you guys have ran all the, the appropriate meetings, the online meetings due to COVID and so forth, participation from public is extremely limited. I mean, 10 people maybe, 13. And I think there's even more people respond to this one than had responded to the initial town's management plan that you put out in 2020. I think that had 10 people that responded to it. I was just looking at it today. But how do you make people participate if they don't want to participate? How do you deal with the silent majority? Do you base passing the bylaws based upon a couple cranks like myself who show up and make a few comments? No, I suggest that what you want to avoid is a situation where you simply rubber stamp documents that are put in front of you. You end up in a situation where after the fact, there's a huge groundswell of people in town who are not supportive of the plan. I mean, I think that happened quite recently in Coaldale for some other development. I'm sure some of you are quite aware of what I'm speaking about. So what our biggest concerns are is, one, 14th Avenue. Why is it not going in? It makes no sense to me, and Mr. Mayor, you might be in a position to offer comments on this, informed comments that I'm not, but station grounds there. It's a large residential complex. Without 14th Street, technically 14th Street has been blocked off. Even though people use it, there's signs saying no through traffic. There are hundreds of homes in there. Lots of people live in there. There's one access. One access. If that thing was ever blocked off for some reason, there was an emergency, what do you do? There is a back alley that goes up there, but it's fenced over. There's another area where there is a fenced over with an access, but that's between private lands. So the only two accesses that are in that area are through off 845 and then through 14th Avenue. Not using 14th Avenue doesn't make any sense to me, and the fact that it's been left out doesn't make any sense either. I've asked sorry, I forgot your name. Cameron. I asked Cameron about that. What's going to happen? He said, well, it's not part of the plan. It's not part of the budget. And with respect, he says, we don't have to do it if we don't want to. Of course, you guys are town council. But you guys represent the silent majority. You don't let this thing get pushed around and decided by the 6 to 10 people who make a few comments on the website about it. Even if we looked at the comments on the website, I did ask for some of the raw data that was sent to me. Pause for a second while I put on the spectacles. There's basically 3 questions that I was given the raw data to, because you were given a summary inside the area structure plan of the results of the survey. And, one of the first books I read in university was How to Lie with Numbers. Numbers can be skewed, they can present it any way that you want to change the position. And in the area structure plan, they make these comments about the community engagement and participation they've got from the council and what they're looking for. But they give the same weight to one person's comment as to multiple people's comment. And they don't even say, was this multiple people, 1 people or 4 people? But if we look through the raw data, and it is limited, is that the first question is, what are your thoughts on the area structure plan? There's a comment in there say, why didn't we finish 14th Avenue? What's going on with that? Another comment here in which there was only 10 people who participated. 3 of them talked about problems with Fort Wise. It looks good because there's access through 14th Avenue. That's 2 people. Another person said, it's good that we get access to the 845 because people want access there. The next comment on the question on the online survey was anything you want to consider. And so the questions here is that why is only one access to the 845? That's going to be a bottleneck. And why is there, the question was originally, I think because originally there was just a cul-de-sac on the end there. That's correct, right? 12th Avenue? They're asking why it's in a main thoroughfare through there. They talked about, changing the ring road to reduce traffic. Think about configuring the street layout so that you have less traffic. How come there's only one road that accesses the highway? Seems like you're inviting traffic congestion. Why does only 12th Avenue connect to the highway? How come 14th Avenue is not already finished? Why is 14th Avenue not done already? I'm not sure why 14th Avenue has never been finished before. And then there was a person here that even talked to, who was actually put comments against it, and that was somebody who was a resident of the, I'm assuming it's Station Grounds, so they simply described themselves as a resident against the industrial park. And their complaint was, you need better roads and better intersections to get through there because they're concerned about traffic. So with this area structure plan, that most of the traffic has been going through this 12th Avenue. People are concerned about what's going to happen on the intersection with 845. Are you going to end up with another street light there, like I think you just read in one of your comments earlier, somebody put in the late comment? Maybe you are. But it would seem to me that you reduce traffic in that area by having more access. If you have one main access there, you're going to have semi-trucks turning in there, and that's going to be a major issue for turning when you're going southbound and you're turning off the 845 into that area. And that's, potentially, there's a lot of access along that road, even on the south side of the town, because it's just a main road goes right into there. But that's all residential. And right now, I still think that the fact that you only have the one access there doesn't make sense. So not only were we led to believe that 14th Avenue is going to be put in, the fact that you don't put it in, and the structure plan right now creates what I see a huge traffic congestion problem. I think that I'm guessing, and I'll get to some of my specific comments when I go through the actual plan itself, I've got the note tabbed, is that the cul-de-sac that's on the south end there's a vague comment in the plan there too that, maybe we'll use that to extend again. So I don't know if that the plan in the future is maybe put that to 14th Avenue as well. Otherwise, it kind of seems strange why there's just that one access there. But back to the specifics of my concerns, because I am not anti-development. I want this to get developed. But A, I need to be a participant in it. B, the development has to make sense to me, and C, the development has to make sense to the community. I talked about, you know, the vocal minority and the silent majority. Those people who are living in the station grounds, and I can't say if it's one person or four, you know, the comment that Cam had read was they were concerned about sound. Well, if they're concerned, the sound right now obviously is not coming from that area. It's coming from the existing commercial development that's behind them to the east, and maybe, although I can't see it because it's so much farther away, the new development the town put in the northeast. The point being is that that's been there forever. Everybody has a not in my backyard opinion. You know, you have one vocal person that cannot control something. The sound issues that are going to happen across that street it's not enough to say we can't put in 14th Avenue for that reason.
So, Kirk,
I know I'm taking a lot of time.
so just one more time then, besides 14th Avenue, what are your other concerns?
Okay, so when right now I'm looking at the intermunicipal development plan that was signed in 2010 with the County of Lethbridge and the Town of Coaldale. And that was sort of the start of the process to negotiate some annexation of the land, okay? And that eventually even had to get approved by the provincial government through the Municipal Government Act. In that process, because, you know, when you live outside in the county, your biggest concern is, geez, I don't want to be paying, you know, town tax rates for my land. So one of the proposals or requirements of that plan was a 25-year transition period, basically a 25-year moratorium. We don't change the tax rates unless there's been a triggering event. The triggering events are outlined in there. So one is creating subdivisions, which we haven't done yet. We did move some land off, but that was by a redivision. A designation by the town council bylaws for another designation, like a change in land use bylaw, which is what that would be. If it's connected to water, that's one thing. If there's a subdivision of larger than any 10 acres, redesignation by the town. I'll just turn this whole thing off. And so the point being is that if that large chunk of land, and they haven't actually said how much land we would taken off our parcel for that stormwater sewer, it's possible it's going to leave us less than 10 acres, which might result in a subdivision lot size less than 10 acres, which would allow the town to retax it differently.
So, Kirk, back to my question then. So 14th Ave, the annexation, the tax implications that you bring up, is there anything else?
Yes. The plan as it stands right now is that, as I understand it, and I've had a copy of it, I think it's the Mallory water drainage plan, Malloy water drainage plan. And so in this land here, there is some reports inside the area structure plan that show where the low areas are. And that would be reflected in the water drainage plan too. And that corner there is the lowest corner. So, you know, it kind of makes sense that that's where it should go, but it doesn't have to go there.
Okay, so your third point is the location of the stormwater pond.
Yes.
Okay, so is there anything else?
Yes, the road access. So if that stormwater pond goes in there and 14th Avenue is closed, how do we access our land? Those roads that are in there are being done on a phased development. We are slated as phase 4B, the last phase. We've got no information at all to say, okay, those roads are going in right away, because you can't not open up 14th Avenue, expect us to to allow part of our land to be used for drainage, and then leave us as an island with no access.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes. Throughout the entire area structure plan, it makes references to the ability to make changes to the plan without going through the public process, without having any public input, and just basically either administration or council can do that. So that's always concerning to me, because if there is amendments to such a plan there, and if this thing is based upon public participation as limited as it is now, it would seem that you wouldn't make any changes to a plan that had public participation without more public participation.
I apologize, Kirk, we're going to give you one more minute, okay?
In the area structure plan as well, not only is this is the pond of concern to us, because at this point we're not willing to give that land out. You know, I think that the developer has to come to us and say, what is the plan here? Because that is way more than the municipal reserve. But on top of that, when they show where they want the utility lines run, because they want to access the existing utility lines that are on 14th Avenue. There's storm sewer there and there's water and all kinds of stuff. But they've decided, if we look at figure 8 of the area structure plan, to put the proposal is to put the access on the west side of the municipal reserve area, rather than the common sense one of putting it on the east side. So, because once you put in a utility line, it hampers development in that area. You can't dig and so forth. That's a concern of mine. And that's something we would have reviewed with them had we had more active involvement in it. Okay. I have had, in my conversations earlier today with Cam, trying to get some of the more detailed documents that these things are referenced in, and I haven't, he's given me, most of them are giving me links to them, but they're quite large, and so it's going to take a bit more time. So, you know, perhaps there's going to be another, is there another public hearing on this?
No.
You know, so the issue there, of course, is my concern is not having notice of the first public hearing. You know, that seems to be a flaw. When I mentioned that to Cam, I said, well, we didn't get notice of that one or this one. I said, well, I think they're in the mail, but maybe they are.
Okay, so we have representatives from ISL Engineering here this evening, and as well Cameron Mills that will do some follow-up answers to your queries.
Okay.
So if I could get you to do me a favor and just take a seat again in the gallery, and then I'll have Cameron and ISL answer some of your concerns.
Okay. As I'll make a departing comment if I were, and that's on section 5 of the area structure plan, the transportation framework, where they references that they will do a transportation plan. But of course, that's done after the fact. So without having kind of a better idea of transportation issues, which is one of the main issues that area residents have brought up, it's kind of horse before the cart, in my opinion.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So, Brian, are you going to speak on behalf then? Okay.
I know there was a mouse here at one point.
Yeah, we had some issues with it.
Okay. Russ? Thank you for having us, Mayor Van Rijn and Council. We're here to speak today about the industrial area structure plan. I'll be speaking a bit to, thank you very much, planning context, the plan area, community consultation, framework and concept when it comes to the development, transportation, and servicing, as well as implementation, current land use amendment that's been provided, as well as the future outline plan, which I think is key to how development is going to occur here and should hopefully provide some clarification. Next slide, please. So not to belabor some of the background, because I think Cam did speak quite well. Thank you. What we're looking here is the plan area. It's identified on actually an overlay of the land use bylaw map, where the lands were annexed in 2000. Current primary land use district is urban reserve. There's also a small parcel in the southwest corner that is currently zoned light industrial. There was in support of the preparation of the area structure plan, there's a biophysical impact assessment. Knowledge within the policies of the plan that if there's more than 5 years between the development of a future outline plan within the ASP area, that a BIA would need to be revisited at that time. Just for everyone's reference, this is a map from the Town Code plan. The area we're speaking to here is identified as future industrial in pink, as well as along 845 near the Gem of the West Museum is future commercial. Next slide, please. And then just with respect to ownership and topography on the plan area, here's the ownership map, and you can kind of see in the topography that it's, generally speaking, a pretty flat piece of land, but there is a slope towards the southeast corner, which is where we have identified a future stormwater management facility within the area structure plan. Slide. With respect to community consultation, so I'll slow down here a little bit, but there was a virtual open house and online survey that was conducted from December until January. I want to believe we actually extended that we normally run those for about 2 weeks, but this one was extended a little bit longer. We had the Delta thaw turned into the Omicron freeze. That sounds about right. So what we were hoping to do was eventually an in-person engagement session in January 18th as well, but it had to be virtual. Around that same time, plan area landowners were contacted directly. So letters were prepared, and I believe it was the town that circulated out the letters. But we provided an outline on the intent of the area structure plan and the proposed development, as well as a development concept at that time. And then, as mentioned, we held the virtual engagement session on January 18th. And then in preparation for bringing the plan forward to the public hearing, notice of the public hearing as well as opportunities to share feedback were provided on Let's Connect Coaldale. That brings us to today, which is our public hearing. So what did we hear? We heard a range of feedback, and this is just a brief outline of how we responded to that feedback. So there were some concerns raised about the impact of the proposed industrial development. So it's important to note that we're reviewing a light industrial development here. So any significant pollution or nuisance factors aren't permitted here. It's actually prohibited within the town by your existing policy documents. There was a suggestion made for a green strip of landscaping and trees to be considered along the west side of the plan area along Highway 845 as a part of a gateway feature to the broader community. So what we propose is a 10-meter wide municipal reserve strip along the east side of Highway 845. There was also some questions with respect to mixed use and the type of mixed use. So I think what's really important here again is the area structure plan speaks to mixed use commercial and industrial, and it'll be at the time of the outline plan is prepared by a developer where you're going to get more clarification on exactly what that mixed use looks like. So in our application, we're actually proposing highway commercial for the portion of the lands for a land use redesignation, but we know that there's already the existing light industrial site, live electric site within that area. So this mixed-use commercial industrial allows for some flexibility going forward when people bring forward their outline plans. One of the issues that came up was with respect to concerns about access to the plan area, traffic congestion, as well as the classification of the road for 12th Avenue. So it's important to note that the transportation network was developed in compliance with the town plan and transportation master plan, and that there's policies within the area structure plan that require traffic impact assessment to be provided as part of a future outline plan application. And that will help to ensure adequate capacity and access to support proposed development. With respect to minimizing potential nuisance between station grounds and the south edge of the development, the plan does not allow for access along 14th Avenue, and policies have been included to require enhanced landscaping along the southern boundary to add a bit of a buffer between the different types of uses. And there was also a request actually with respect to, from the Birds of Prey on whether the plan area pass would connect, and so policies have been included into the area structure plan to allow for future development of non-vehicular routes. Last but not least, there was some clarification about the location and configuration of the cul-de-sacs, and as mentioned by Cam earlier, the cul-de-sacs are there and they're not permanent necessarily cul-de-sacs, and should future development or upgrading of the road network occur, then they could potentially be connected through into the plan area. Next slide, please. When it comes to the actual development concept and framework, we've got 3 primary land uses. So as noted, industrial, it's in the name, it's an industrial area structure plan. The mixed-use transition area, so the commercial / industrial, and as well as some open space. And so this open space, as mentioned, is going to be located along the 10-meter wide municipal reserve buffer along the west side, as well as a little bit of MR around the proposed stormwater management facility. What are we looking at with respect to the concept and the framework? So we've got a gross area here of 148 acres, and it's all considered to be developable. Of that, 115 is proposed for industrial development, 20 acres for mixed-use transition, and then another 12 for open space. And so just with reference to your policies, municipal reserve dedication shall be up to 10% of developable land, whether land or cash in lieu, and that comes right out of the Municipal Government Act. But we also have a policy here for high-quality landscaping, which will comply with the requirements of the land use bylaw and the landscaping parameters and screening, which will be required as conditions of subdivision or development permit approval. Another policy within the plan is a historical resource overview, shall be required at the outline plan stage. We're aware of a potential site in the southwest corner of the ASP area, and that'll be identified at the time that an outline plan is made. And if at that time it's required, then a historical resource impact assessment would be triggered if the findings of the HRO deem it to be significant. And last but not least, development along the 845 corridor should comply with the universal guidelines and site-specific strategies in the town's gateways and corridor strategic plan. So those are some of the policies within the area structure plan that provide guidelines for the development concept moving forward. So here's one of the items I wanted to spend a little bit of time on today is the traffic impact assessment, the transportation framework for the area structure plan. So one of the policies there is that a traffic impact assessment shall be required as a supporting study to the outline plan, or to an outline plan. So there is an outline plan that we're working with our client to develop for their portion of the plan area. And so we are undertaking a TIA as part of that. And so the preliminary findings of this TIA, and it actually does look more comprehensively at the north side of Coaldale, indicate that an extension of the Collector Road, 12th Avenue, will accommodate internal circulation. So the anticipation is that at full build-out, so as Cam mentioned, 12th Avenue is currently terminates in a cul-de-sac. So when that is developed through towards 845, that will be able to take on all the additional traffic from development. That has not been finalized. That will be finalized and attached to the submission for a future outline plan. Next slide, please. One of the things that the area structure plan supports or promotes within the policy is an optional road framework. So if within the outline plan, if there is additional density or an opportunity to provide additional lots, as long as adjacent landowners are not negatively affected by the proposed changes and the revised alignments are consistent with your standards, what the plan does is it allows for, at the outline plan stage, increased lot density, so smaller parcels. Next slide. So some of the policies within the plan with respect to servicing. So a site servicing study that covers water, sanitary, stormwater, and shallow utilities is required as a supporting study to the outline plan. This study will examine site servicing requirements and offsite infrastructure to support full development. Any necessary offsite infrastructure upgrades shall be identified along with costs, and detailed design of shallow utilities shall be determined at the subdivision stage, as well as shallow utility and overhead utility easement conflicts shall be resolved at time of subdivision. What these policies here are designed to do is tie the servicing strategy to an outline plan. So when the future outline plan comes out, there'll be more detailed information for the servicing of the outline plan area, which is within the area structure plan. I'm not an engineer, but we do have an engineer in the gallery here. So this is just an overview of, I think we have several engineers actually, just an overview of the water distribution, the sanitary servicing, as well as the stormwater management systems as proposed in the area structure plan. And again, it'll be the more detailed servicing study at the outline plan stage, which will make sure that this high-level picture works on the ground. Next slide, please. So in terms of implementation, the sequence of the development plan area will be informed by the patterns of growth management, and it will occur in a staged approach. And this is allowing the development to ensure that logical expansion occurs. And I've lost my pointer. But as you'll see, phase one is on the east and to the southeast of the plan area. So that would connect to 12th Avenue right now and include the stormwater management facility. And then when phase two goes online, that would finish out the extension of 12th Avenue to 845. And then phase three would, some of the lands in the middle, which will be easy to uptake. 4A and 4B, there's not, I don't believe they're timing dependent, but it's important to note that 4B in particular will have internal circulation access at the time of phase one, as it's been designed at this time. So the site will have connection at phase one. Next slide. One of the other items that we're here for is with respect to the concurrent land use amendment. So this is predominantly within the 845 development lands, but it also is with respect to the stormwater management facility for the Reuben Tams at all lands to accommodate the stormwater management facility. So as noted, this is highway commercial, which is in alignment with the proposed area structure plan for the mixed use industrial commercial, as well as industrial I, which is in alignment with the area structure plan as well. That's what's been proposed for a land use amendment. And I do believe there's one last slide. And this just wraps up our presentation, but I think it speaks to the importance of the future outline plan. So planning within the town of Coaldale, we've got area structure plans, and they provide what is required under the Municipal Government Act with respect to future development. And although outline plans are not legislated under the Municipal Government Act, they provide important decision-making tools approved by resolution of council. So as noted in your town plan, an outline plan is a non-statutory plan confirming the suitability and servicing method of the lands for the proposed use. An outline plan may be for a smaller area within the boundaries of an area structure plan and involves detailed studies including but not limited to technical investigation, environmental impact assessment, transportation impact assessment, and stormwater management analysis. So a lot of the technical servicing and transportation related details will be addressed within a future outline plan. But it's important to note that within the policies of this area structure plan, some of the things that we're looking for within the ASP, a future outline plan needs to include a statement of alignment with this area structure plan, a detailed plan itself, what's going to happen for those lands within the outline plan, as well as some statistics to underpin that. And then information pertaining to access, internal road network, roadway classifications, fire and EMS, mail delivery, utility, water, sanitary storm, parcel servicing, and shallow utilities. So that's the technical information that is determined and put forward within an outline plan. There are also several technical studies that may be required in support of the preparation of the outline plan. And as mentioned, there is a traffic impact assessment that's currently being developed for the 845 development lands, as well as site servicing, stormwater management study. And I believe a historical resources overview is being undertaken by the town, just to make sure we know where that site is and that there's no impact to it. That concludes our presentation. I hope I kept it within 5.4 minutes.
You did,
And
did pretty well. So I'm just going to ask Cameron to pull up a chair on the end of the table, and I'm also going to ask Kirk to pull up his chair on the end of this table. And then John, can you bring a couple of microphones out to them, please? And Kirk, just for our viewers at home, we have to use microphones, so we can't speak without one. And I just want Cameron to address some of Kirk's questions that he brought up. And once he does that, I'll open it up to council for questions as well. So Kirk, you're going to need that microphone.
Happy to do so. Thank you for the opportunity. So first, I guess, with respect to the question of Mr. Baylor had brought up some concerns with respect to notice or participation. And administration's point of view on that would simply be that we had a substantial amount of direct consultation between the developer and the landowners, and substantial opportunity for landowners within the plan as well as in the surrounding area to provide commentary on the plan in terms of incorporating that into the development. We saw that through the presentation which ISL just provided, which provided us with that. With respect to the notices sent, it is correct that the notice would have been sent to the address on land titles. That is true of all notices that are sent for these types of things. And I guess to provide some reference to that, all of our mailings are pulled, through that. So if there are multiple owners of a particular parcel, the notification is sent to the address, or the mailing address is pulled from the land title system. So if Suncor owns a parcel of land in the town that is provided with notification, whatever address is associated with land titles for that particular parcel is where it is sent. It is not sent to every shareholder of Suncor, nor is it sent to the corporate address through the corporate registry for that particular company, just to use one example. Mr. Tams was certainly was provided with those notifications, and we know that he certainly received them because we've had correspondence between ourselves. Prior to Spencer's departure, Spencer had some opportunities to consult with Mr. Tams, which I would have participated in it as well. And in fact, one of the concerns Mr. Tams brought up in our discussions was the preference for having a corner lot, or a lot that would have had two access points, because the belief was that would have provided potentially greater value for a lot, and that is the reason, part of the reason why the cul-de-sac southern portion is there, was designed in order to provide with them that simply on the west side of the parcel rather than the east. So there's certainly consideration raised from our consultation with Mr. Tams that's provided direct input into the development of the plan. With respect to our notifications, so we have an advertising bylaw in the town of Coaldale, and that bylaw provides for specific listing for what is required, and notification is deemed provided based on Section 606 of the Municipal Government Act, which requires us to advertise for a bylaw resolution, meeting, or public hearing. And that bylaw provides for a number of different mediums for which the town may choose, and we have to meet one of those requirements, and that includes electronically publishing on the town's engagement website, Let's Connect Coaldale at least 10 days before the event occurs, or published at least once a week for 2 consecutive weeks in at least one newspaper, which was done through the Sunny South News, or mailed out directly to all of the following: each owner of land within a minimum of 60 meters of the boundaries of the lot by regular mail, which was done. And because from our initial conversation with Mr. Baylor, we did hear that perhaps residents hadn't received those through mail, since we simply don't control the mail. in the spirit of ensuring that people receive them, Melanie Messier from our planning department printed a second notice and hand delivered those notices to the residents of Station Grounds, and the various folks within the circulation area in order to ensure that people had the opportunity to know of the public hearing. So I'm quite confident we meet more than the requirements for notification to that respect. As far as conversations with respect to 14th Avenue, I had a conversation informally with Mr. Croyle about this, reached out to him just on the questions. I wanted to ensure that a promise hadn't been made that I wasn't aware of. And his indication to me was that there was never been any suggestion or sort of firm commitment from the town that there would be development of 14th Avenue. The administration's position on 14th Avenue is simply this. The road right-of-way exists. The plan, as it's designed, doesn't require for the construction or development of 14th Avenue. There's not significant connection between the southern part of the existing industrial park that would substantially benefit from connecting 14th Avenue across to the highway. And there's a substantial cost associated with development of half a mile of 14th Avenue. Unless that provides for significant payback for the town, it isn't necessarily something that we would encourage unless we deem it necessary. And when we review the plan and we look at the traffic network that's provided, we refer that, as I discussed, to Alberta Transportation. Alberta Transportation owns and operates the Highway 845. And they are very happy with the plan as it's provided. They are very happy with the connection point along 12th Avenue. They'll, of course, review the traffic impact assessment. The traffic impact assessment will, in turn, tell us what sorts of upgrades are going to be required in order to make this transportation network a reality. So what exactly will the design of the infrastructure that connects 12th Avenue, or the intersection that connects 12th Avenue to Highway 845, that will be a technical analysis done by technical experts, and they will only have a resolution to that once Alberta Transportation is satisfied that the design is correct, and the experts that work for Alberta Transportation will be satisfied. Generally speaking, Alberta Transportation's preference is to minimize the number of accesses to the highway, not to provide for too many of them. From their perspective, broadly, their preference is to see a well-designed intersection, the requirements of traffic, not multiple, smaller, less developed intersections. So that is generally the point of view, and that is why their preference is for the access point along 12th Avenue, and that's why the plan is designed that way. And if in the long term, 14th Avenue, or I believe it is 10th Avenue to the north, is developed, that will be developed in accordance with the specifications and requirements of Alberta Transportation through that stage of the planning process.
In the annexation and the tax, can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you. So in my preliminary conversation with Mr. Baylor, I did indicate it, but from my perspective, there is no triggering event here, and we can certainly discuss making some changes to make that more certain. But realistically speaking, the spirit of that agreement is to say that there is some sort of improvement to the property, so subdivision of the property or rezoning for the purpose of development. A rezoning to incorporate public infrastructure really isn't, from my perspective, an appropriate triggering mechanism for changing the tax rate of a parcel. But that being said, there might be an opportunity to make adjustments to the bylaws to ensure that that's not required, based on the feedback from this public hearing. But no, I am not of the perspective that this would represent a triggering change from a taxation perspective whatsoever.
Okay, and then the storm pond location?
So the storm pond location, and again, this is an area structure plan, so if I may, so section 633 of the Municipal Government Act governing area structure plan says, for the purpose of providing a framework for subsequent subdivision and development of an area of land, a council may by bylaw adopt an area structure plan. An area structure plan must describe the sequence of development proposed for the area, the land uses proposed for the area, either generally or with respect to specific parts of the area, the density of population, which is obviously not a concern here, and the general location of major transportation routes and public utilities. And our perspective with our approach to this area structure plan has been to follow more of the letter of the Municipal Government Act. So this is perhaps an area structure plan that is more on the general than specific side of area structure plans. Some area structure plans will incorporate the outline plan and the specific studies and build it right into the area structure plan. And because this is, first of all, an area which there is, reason for the municipality to prefer to see relatively quick development of. And second, because there are 6 different landowners within the broader quarter section, the approach was to say, let's have an area structure plan that meets that general requirement and shift some of the more technical burden to the outline plan stage where individual landowners, when they're prepared for development, might be able to do that. And that provides for the most efficient use of the preparation of this planning framework. So, to come back to this, the planning area which shows for the pond doesn't represent a photo of what the pond will ultimately look like. Really, my interpretation of this plan would be to suggest that the stormwater management will be incorporated into the southeastern portion of the quarter, which is the low section of the quarter, and of course the engineering studies which are forthcoming and which are clearly outlined in the plan will provide for the exact number of cubic meters of water that need to be stored and will provide for how that is going to be constructed down the line.
And then the last comment I would like from you, Cameron, is just to explain one more time the area structure plan that the town is going to cover the costs of, and then as the other landowners come on stream, when they have to pay their portion. Can you just go over that one more time?
Absolutely. And so this area structure plan is being prepared by the proponent, which is 845 Developments, who have approximately 90 acres within the broader quarter. The rest of the development of the area structure plan is being done in conjunction with the town, and the town covers that cost and can recoup those costs when the other lot owners choose to enact development within that. So we keep a recording of what the value of it is, and we provide for, within the development agreement that's signed with the proponent, we provide for what's known as an endeavor to assist clause. So that would include compensation coming back to the developer if they install, potentially if they install infrastructure that's ultimately going to be used by other folks, if that provides for them their need to access, through that infrastructure. That would include the stormwater management, that would include the area structure plan costs, and all of the rest of that. And we just want to make sure that those costs are fairly allocated throughout the quarter, but only at the time where those other landowners are actually engaging in development.
So with that being said, then, if you participate in that area structure plan now versus if you wait 10 or 15 years, what's the potential for the cost difference to be for someone to come on stream?
Well, typically the endeavor to assist would provide for approximately a 20-year window in my experience, but those can also be extended by council if they so choose. So in my opinion, certainly, in my opinion, and as someone who has some experience on the private side of these types of things, the cost is still largely borne by the proponents. So there's usually a bit of a financial advantage associated with coming on after the fact. The endeavor to assist clauses certainly provide for some reconciliation to that, but is generally the principal developer that tends to bear a little bit more of the cost. So it in my opinion, represents a pretty good deal for the other components involved. And again, they don't have to spend that money until they're ready to make their land a development from the traditional sense.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'll open up to council for questions for any of our panel guests. Is there any questions by council for anyone? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Cam. Thank you. So, you had mentioned earlier about, like, down the road, you guys will have to see what the traffic solutions could be down the road. So, with respect to, like, the traffic lights or the traffic circle and stuff like that, so that will be after that's actually developed then?
Thank you, yes. So I'll speak to it briefly, and then perhaps either ISL or the representatives from Talbera can speak to it. But the traffic impact assessment will review the plan proposal and generate model traffic volumes based on that proposal. And then that traffic volume will be applied to the road network. And through that modeling and through engineering design standards, which are pretty standard across, they're not simply, unique to Coaldale, provide for an understanding of what are the turn radiuses required at intersections, when are, is there a certain amount of development that triggers lights at 12th Avenue, for example, or any other intersection that's identified as part of that study. And once that study is done, and that is usually done as part of the more detailed analysis of what would be the outline plan, that will tell us, oh, okay, so phase 2 will connect to, for example, I don't have the document, so I can't say. I'd say something to the effect of the connection point between the existing industrial and Highway 845 will be completed, and a type 2 intersection will be required, and then phase 3 will trigger the expansion to a type 3 intersection, which is perhaps an additional turning lane or something to that. And then the developer might look at that and say, okay, well, it's cheaper to just do it once, so I'm going to build it fully out to a type 3, even though I could do it as a type 2 and then expand it. So they'll have the opportunity to consider that. But their plan is going to need to be approved by Alberta Transportation, who manages that intersection as well as the other intersections along the highway.
And then you were mentioning about like possibly rerouting the truckers. I mean, is that something that could be done sooner once that development begins?
Thank you. I think realistically what we're looking at here, and again, the specifics of the traffic model will come through that plan. But what you're going to have when you consider what the broader model for the town is once 12th Avenue connects between the 845 through the industrial park and over to 8th Street on the east side of the industrial park and down, is it provides for an opportunity now for large traffic to avoid going through the majority of town if it's entering these areas. So you can come in through 8th Street, you can access our industrial park, and from that industrial park you can access the highway without needing to, say, use the intersection, what's typically known as the 7-Eleven intersection, for example.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from council? Okay, so Kirk, I'll give you a minute to kind of have a little closing comments. And we just finish. And then if you have any specific questions, you can email those to Cameron, and he'll get those answers for you. Okay.
My comment was going to be, I appreciate we just wanted to stop this. We just don't in its current form. Improve it in its current form. We weren't we weren't consulted with it. Yes, there was conversations with Spencer and my business partner Ruben had those. But throughout that entire process, we had expected we would get notice of the. And in those initial conversations with Spencer Pearl, there was no promise to do 14th Street. Not that to come across as sort of a promise. The conversation with Spencer Pearl went options. One, we could submit our own area structure plan, which would include developing 14th Avenue. And at that time, we were told as well that there would be an endeavor to for the cost of that road, or we could wait until the town instituted its area structure plan. Our plan was long-term speculation. We're okay with it. Secondly, when it comes to comments about the buffer zone, is that a 30-meter buffer zone?
I'm sorry, which comments?
Along the southern boundary.
Between station grounds and the development, there's a buffer.
Thank you. There was a landscaping, speaking of the landscaping buffer?
No, yes, exactly. But what the area structure plan said that notwithstanding the land use bylaw, they wanted to extend the buffer zone. Right. Was it 30 feet or 30 meters? Irrespective, is that the extension of a buffer zone, it's a massive amount of land. I think it's proper for the town to, for all intents and purposes would be, to increase its municipal reserve by simply making a special exemption for this property, this one property that's not in accordance with the land use bylaw as it currently sits. Take more land away from us. And the purpose of that, taking that land away, is ideally for this buffer zone. We've already heard from administration is that there's no extra noise there. The current use doesn't allow for noxious odors or emissions in town. Why would we be punished by having that land was going to be part of the municipal reserve? Fine. entitled to 10% of that land, you can use it as you great. But then that removes the amount of land that's available. So my point being is equitable for a plan that intends on taking some land away from a current land use owner to provide a buffer zone, which is not required based upon if you want to buy the land. For what we need for the bylaw for both of us, greatest respect to administration, they change. People only refer to what's in the writing. So comments from Pam about what his interpretation will happen in the future, what a future council might do for taxation of that area, I'd much rather have it in the bylaw itself. There should be an amendment that says that there will be no change to the taxation of this land. I would suggest until a development permit is issued. Our plan with long-term development, we were farming that land until the current developer bought it, and then the farmer had to leave, and he couldn't farm our land anymore. It's only a small area. So we were going to turn it to hay. The comment about the cul-de-sac in the south, giving us this desired corner lot. Yes, we want a corner lot, but we want a corner lot where the road is. If 14th Street's not going in, we need a corner lot there. So I think that pond can move north. Yes, that is the lower spot, but that pond's not going to be 6 inches deep. It's going to be quite deep. And it's going to be a natural drainage as well, because it's only down by a foot or something like that. Like I said, that land is pretty flat as it is. Have to be there. And they want the pond there to connect to the pond across the street there, because that pond I think was insufficient. That ditch is always full of water and so forth. Well, move it closer so it goes right across. But we'd also like town council to have some sort of a definitive statement on the plan for 14th Avenue. I think that we want that street. It's a matter of saying, well, it's got to be approved by Alberta Transportation. With the greatest respect, is that when that was sent to Alberta Transportation, they're looking at the area structural plan that exists. When you look at this plan, you said it in, it looks like 14th Street there. That somebody's sitting up at Alberta Transportation saying, well, they're not looking at 14th Avenue, because they're looking at the area structure plan, and everything that's sent in shows there's a street there, but there's not. So we'd like a plan for 14th Avenue. We'd like that pond to be moved to the north. And if it does get moved to the north, the question you have to ask yourself, what's the point of passing a bylaw right now where the land, we haven't agreed to sell it. The amount of land that's available to the town's municipal reserve is insufficient. I read it in the plan too, and there was a brief comment from Cam about an historical resource in the southwest corner, but nobody says what it is. You'd think that there's a historical resource, you guys should know about it, but shouldn't the town know about it as well? Is it, for some reason, we're not saying anything about it. What is this historical resource, and where is it? The town would be entitled to approximately just over 1.4 acres from municipal reserve, either by payment or by land. Our initial thought was that the land would go into the municipal reserve there. Maybe that was the original plan. The comment about the rest of the land, when we're dealing with Dennis, I have to say is that there is no financial incentive or advantage for this. I like the idea that the town wants to do a one plan there, but in our very brief conversation with Dennis, who's the owner, his initial comment was that, no, we're going to give them that land to pay for our cost of all the area structure plan and so forth. Or do some sort of land swap or whatever, but it was never an issue that we're going to get this immediate financial benefit from it.
Okay, Kirk, I need you to close out, please.
Okay. Long story short is that the plan doesn't have our cooperation. It seems to me you need our cooperation.
Point taken. I'll just open it up to council one more time. Is there any more questions for any of our panel guests? Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So my question is for Cam. So Cam, what's the impact of taking this piece out of our area structure plan and just going back with their original developers? And then we can deal with the partners in this section at a later date.
Fairly minimal impact, and in fact, the opportunity to consider Mr. Baylor here. utilities run across the land. Redesigning the plan to move north, perhaps to size it a little bit smaller to bring Mr. Baylor's land out of the equation in terms of that calculation. Relatively simple endeavor. We would need some access, particularly for utilities down to the main utility. However, an opportunity to speak with the folks on the live electric parcel to that effect. They're very happy with the amount of engagement that they've had in terms of the development of the plan. They're very eager to see this go forward. The opportunity to access the north, and they're happy to provide property which would allow for those utility services to be brought in. So I am of the opinion that realistically a lot of the problems that have been addressed today are resolvable by simply directing, if council were to direct administration to make some minor amendments to the plan to remove Mr. Baylor's lot from the plan, accommodations for minor adjustments to the plan in order to accommodate for that. We could provide that before providing for second and third reading.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Any more questions from council? Okay, seeing none then, I will now ask council if they have sufficient information to make a decision on the area structure plan bylaw 844-P-03-22 regarding the West Industrial Area Structure Plan, and bylaw 845-P-03-22 regarding the West Industrial Area rezoning. Councillor Reese.
I would like to move that I'd like to make a motion that council move to close the public hearing.
I'll be doing that.
Oh,
as
you'll
the
be
chair.
doing, oh, yeah, sorry.
That's
Then
okay.
I'm making a motion to proceed with the second reading with amendments.
Okay, that'll come up further down the
Oh,
agenda.
geez.
Okay.
And I don't know what I'm making a motion for then, right
No,
now.
that's okay. Okay, so if everybody has sufficient information, I'm going to call the public hearing closed at 6:47 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so we have our agenda item that we need to, let me just find it here. Okay, so we're going to go to item 8.1, our council communications strategy, and we're going to have Jan Enns, our consultant that worked with council on the proposal, and she's going to be joining us by Zoom. Jan, can you hear us? Okay. Anne is just going to need a few more minutes to get organized. So we're going to jump ahead to 8.4, the free pantry structure. And we have Melanie Messier, our planner, that's going to be presenting on that. And we have two guests that are going to be here as well. So if you two ladies want to take a seat at the table with Mel, or three, that'd be great. Mel, are we going to need more than one microphone up there? Okay. So Mel is going to be presenting on agenda item 8.4, a report to present council with a request from the Family and Community Support Services, FCSS, Youth Do Crew to install a free pantry in the public right-of-way adjacent to the hub. So Mel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So first I want to welcome Shannon, Jasmine, and Nisha, and thank them for attending today to present on the Little Pantry project. So it is worth noting that Shannon initially reached out to the town to request additional information on what would be required of FCSS and the Youth Do Crew to install a Little Free Pantry. So the group has applied for the town's community grant to complete the project, and they've been proactive in ensuring that they're taking all the necessary steps to do everything that the town would require, such as applying for permits. Given the structure is expected to be permanent, it is the recommendation that a development permit be issued for the structure to ensure that it's accounted for and put onto FCSS's property file. So in terms of what the Little Free Pantry is, I'll just pass it over to Shannon and the ladies over here just to describe what their team is proposing. So you just want to...
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor and Council, for having us here today to talk about the Little Free Pantry. As Mel already mentioned, I'm joined by two members of the Youth Do Crew here. So we have Nisha and Jasmine. So we're first just going to talk a little bit about what the Free Pantry is. Then I'm going to hand it over to these two ladies to talk about who's involved with the project, who we're expecting will benefit from it, and then we'll talk a little bit about some free pantries that exist in other communities. So first and foremost, Little Free Pantry is a give and take resource that's designed for neighbors or community members to help other neighbors who need either food or hygiene or personal items. It's not intended to replace emergency food services such as the food bank and all the services that they provide, but rather to strengthen the food system here in Coaldale and kind of promote or serve as a safety net, maybe for somebody whose paycheck ran short this week and they just need a couple things to get by, or a student who forgot their lunch that day. So by promoting the pantry and having the Do Crew build and promote it, we are encouraging community members to give what they can, take what they need, and we hope to not only promote food security, but also community building in Coaldale as we invite residents to participate in the project. So now I'm going to pass it over to Nisha here.
So for who is involved in this project, the Coaldale Youth Do Crew, which is made up of high school students, will be leading this project with the help of the FCSS Youth Do Crew coordinator. Currently, there are 11 active members of the Youth Do Crew in Coaldale, and the program is open to everyone in grades 10 to 12. Additionally, the FCS staff will help to monitor the pantry and manage all expenditures related to the project. Now I will turn it over to Jasmine to discuss who will benefit.
So the Little Free Pantry is for everyone. For those not able to meet everyday food and personal needs, maybe a hungry student after school, a home cook just missing one item, and those who want or need to give. The pantry is an easy and efficient way for the people to participate and help in their community. By leaving food in the pantry, people can rest assured that their donations are positively benefiting others in their community. As a zero-barrier access point to emergency food and hygiene items, everyone is encouraged to reap the benefits of the pantry. The pantry's proposed location will ensure that it is easily accessible by car, on foot, or with a mobility aid such as a scooter or a walker. People can walk right up to the pantry and either take what they need or leave their donations. Being in close proximity to the hub will create an easy access point for FCSS clients entering the building to access the program and services offered out of the facility, increasing residents' awareness of and interaction with the project. The hub is also located near R.A. Baker Middle School, Sunny South Lodge and their Manors, and is close to the community center. This location will allow for easier access and increased foot traffic. It will also ensure the pantry is accessible to all who wish to participate in the project. And I'll give it back to Shannon about how it will be maintained.
So the maintenance of the pantry will be taken care of by the volunteers in the DEW crew, as well as my colleagues at FCSS. So we'll be inspecting the pantry on a regular basis, with the proposed location just being outside the hub. It's visible from our office windows. It's also pretty visible from the street or from the middle school as well. So we'll be going out, just making sure there's no inappropriate items, removing them if so, and also completing repairs as needed. Any surplus donations or things that are temperature sensitive, like canned goods in frozen weather, will be taken and stored inside the hub, and then we'll put them back in the pantry when it's suitable. We have plans to have the volunteers from the DEW crew give it a fresh coat of paint every summer to keep up the curb appeal, and so it's nice and bright and visually appealing for everybody walking by. And if there's any damage or vandalism to the structure, we'll immediately report it to FCSS staff, most likely myself, and then it'll be resolved as soon as possible. So really quickly, I just kind of wanted to share a few success stories about the Little Free Pantries, just for your consideration. So the Little Free Pantry movement actually started back in 2016 in Arkansas. There was a community member who saw that there were some little free library structures that they didn't feel were being really well utilized, so they worked with their local library to turn them into pantries. It followed suit, thinking this would be a good way to help out community members who had kind of fallen on some tough times. One of those communities are our neighbors to the south. So in Raymond, there are 3 little free pantries in the community. The volunteers behind the project have actually formed a formal society, and they've been so successful and have been so well utilized that they're now freezers and fridges for perishable items, just to kind of increase the variety that they have there. I've had the chance to connect with some of the members of the board from the Free Pantry in Raymond, and they've been very helpful and have provided a lot of great insight. And then Vulcan FCSS also manages a little free pantry there. Same thing, they had taken over a little free library and converted it into a pantry. And the one there is neat because it complements the programs and services that they already offer out of the Vulcan Food Bank, whereas Raymond's a little bit unique in that they don't have a food bank in the community. So Jasmine's going to wrap us up here, I think, and then we'll pass it back over to Mel. And if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
So for the financial impact, the DEW crew has applied for a grant of $1,250 from the Coaldale Community Wellness Association to help us complete this project. In addition, should council wish to consider, the Town of Coaldale's Operations Department has indicated they can assist with the underground locates and installation of the structure's poles, and we are very grateful for their support and help to complete the Little Free Pantry project.
Thanks so much. So just to add on that, the operations department has already conducted a site visit to the proposed location. They have indicated that there is a fiber optic line that is parallel to 13th Street, which is part of the reason why they've offered to help with the installation of the pole and have already conducted the locates. So with that, council may wish to consider the 4 options that are highlighted within the staff report, with the staff recommendation that council approve that administration move forward with issuing the development permit for the free pantry structure and waive the development permit and operational fees associated with the installation.
Okay, well, thank you. Excellent presentation. So I'll open up to council if there's any questions. Councillor Reese.
So I was just wondering, like, how difficult will it be to find volunteers each year once these students graduate and go on to university or college? Like, is that going to be a difficult thing to do?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Reese. So just to really highlight Shannon's role at FCSS, FCSS will really be the owner of this free pantry structure, and that's part of the reason why we'd like it to be a development permit on their property file, so we can kind of manage and monitor it. And the Youth Do Crew does have new members, and we can work with FCSS to ensure that, you know, maybe it's always on their radar should Shannon move on, and that we're keeping up with it as well. But we as staff can do a little bit more work to ensure that we're touching base with FCSS.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to put this through to the panel. When this is installed, is it locked like at the end of the day, or who monitors it, or how does it, you keep it so nobody vandalizes, or?
That's a great question. Thank you. So I'll just provide a little bit of context, I guess. So in my discussions with the executive members from the Little Free Pantry Society in Raymond, they actually indicated that in the evening, after dusk, is when the pantries are most often utilized. Their theory behind that is that it's dark, so people won't see them going and accessing help. So that is kind of one of the big ideas behind this pantry, is that it's a zero barrier access point. So it's open at all hours. So if somebody's working during the day, they're able to drop by in the evening, or if it's a situation where they maybe don't feel comfortable walking in front of the hub or on 13th Street and having someone maybe see them. As far as vandalism goes, we're certainly aware that there is a risk of vandalism when it comes to putting up a structure like this. We do have plans to have a solar light installed in the pantry so that it's pretty visible, and we are hoping that with it having kind of a central location that's pretty visible from the street, that it will mitigate some of that risk. But that being said, if it does happen, if there is damage or vandalism overnight, that will probably be the first thing on my radar. I can see the proposed location right from my office window, so it'll be taken care of by either myself or one of my colleagues kind of as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, ladies, for the presentation. I don't have a question as much as I have a comment. These on the thing of vandalism there, I find these things, I did a lot of looking into these over the weekend, and these little free pantries, they kind of create a snowball effect, I found. A friend of ours has set up their own in their community in Lethbridge, and actually has had overwhelmingly positive results. I don't want to say it's been a trigger to kind of create a little bit more harmony in their community, but it's just a little area by the NMAX Center in Lethbridge, and they set it up just out of the goodness of their heart, and they said probably the biggest problem that they run into it is sometimes they have too many donations. So it's strength in just that little unit in on the south side of Lethbridge. I'd love to see something like this, snowball into 2 or 3, like what Raymond's doing. I think this is an awesome idea. Kudos to you guys for putting this forward. This was a great presentation and a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you as well to each and every one of you for your presentation and for your vision behind this and the inspiration that's taking place. I think that's exciting. Thank you, Shannon, for taking the charge and leading it. And of course, thank you to the Do Crew, Youth Do Crew, for all your inspiration and your vision for this. So I'd be happy to make a motion to approve this project, and that council approved the administration to move forward with issuing a development permit for the free pantry structure and to waive development permit and operational fees for installation.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you once again. Make sure you send us pictures.
Yeah.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Okay, I apologize for jumping all over the agenda this evening. I believe we're ready now for agenda item 8.1, the council communications strategy. And we will be having Jan Enns, our consultant. Jan, let me know if you can hear us. We can't hear you. We're still trying on this end, Jan. We're still dealing with technical difficulties, Jan. Okay, try talking now, Jan. Okay. And if you could talk loud as well, that would help. Yes, okay, go ahead. Oh, 1 second, Jan, we lost you again. Okay, try talking now. There we go. Go ahead.
And what I'm going to provide tonight, which is the draft for discussion. Hear me okay?
We can see your slide presentation and we can hear you.
The found through the community survey that you had.
One second, Jan, we lost you again.
Okay. Am I back?
Try talking once, Jan.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Check, check.
We're still trying to find what's going on this end, Jan.
Oh my goodness. Well, Atlanta can text me and see if it, so I've got my iPhone here. Any luck? testing again?
Jan, we're going to try phoning you.
Okay, sure. How we doing there? Hello. Hi there. How's that?
That's better. We're still going to follow your slide presentation, so that part of it should still work.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, and so how's that sound then?
We're good now. You're good to go.
Okay, thank you so much. Won't it be great when... Thank you, Your Worship, for your patience and counsel. So just a bit of background about the foundation for this strategy really began with your community vision survey that went into creating your strategic priorities. I'm just going to turn my volume off here. There we go. Strategic priorities. And really a lot of good information that went into creating those priorities, but we also heard a number of themes that came up that were related to communication around transparency and openness and listening and inclusiveness and all those good things. So with that, you developed your strategic priorities, and communications actually sort of fits in all of them, but there was a few that specifically were in response to some of the feedback that you heard, and that was your strategic priority in terms of relationships, about focusing on that deliberate and meaningful two-way engagement, and also around service levels, communicating with folks around the level of service that you provide, the projects, programs, services, all that kind of good stuff. So knowing that is our communication strategy is aligned with those throughout the plan. The other piece that we did was that wonderful workshop where we had a chance to really get our fingers into the communications planning side of things and look at what does good communication look like. So from council's perspective, some of the things that really became apparent were that it needed to be proactive and trustworthy and professional, clear, predictable, planned, empathetic, engaging, all those good things. But we've woven those into the plan as well. Now let me just give you a quick 50,000-foot overview of the strategy. It is meant to be an overarching strategy. So as you do have other communication plans, such as a crisis comms plan or a social media plan, or you have a public participation policy. So all of those are meant to be sort of housed under here. This strategy will guide you through all of your communications. It's also based on some very foundational guiding principles, and I'm going to share those with you in just a moment as well. And those principles are really the lens that help you make decisions about communications. The plan itself contains 4 goals. It has about 10 objectives. They are, with each objective is listed a whole laundry list of action items. And it also has an action plan where we've taken those action items and looked at the tactics that we need to get things done and laid them out both in terms of things you can do in the next 6 months and things that might take a little longer. So overall, it really is about communicating for good governance. And this is important because the research tells us that excellence in organizations is linked to excellence in public relations, or as we more commonly know it in local government, in communications and engagement. So you're definitely on the right path, and this plan will get you there. So let's start with first the guiding principles, just a quick snapshot of what those are. Really, it was about those community-first communications. That was important to you in your discussions as a council, and also what we heard in the community visioning survey. How do we make that? How do we make those our communications open, honest, and transparent? Also, that our communications are proactive. We're not waiting to communicate, but we're actively looking ahead and how can we be proactive, but also really positive. You've got a lot on the go and a lot of great things in your community, and of course professional. So we want to make sure things are timely and that they're relevant and that they're clear as we move forward. The other one that was very important was to make sure that we inform and involve or engage early and often. And that was really important, again, both the council and the community. People want to be informed about the what, the why, and really the how much of what's happening. And that's where communications can really bring home the message, both in informing people, telling people what's going on, or in the case where we can invite public input or feedback, seeking to consult or engage them. And I'd just like to say hats off to you as a council for taking the International Association of Public Participation training. That's such a fantastic program and really is foundational to having a lens to help you make those decisions about when to engage. The other three are inside-out communications, the fact that the people who are going to be impacted find out first that we have this inside-out lens, that they're not hearing about it on the local news station. And that includes staff and council as well, that you're not learning about things at the A&W, that we have a very, proactive and predictable process for communications. The other was that relationships are important. This was clearly important in your strategic planning session and remains so as a guiding principle. And that's really about making sure that we are reaching the people that need to be reached, that we're collaborating, that there's teamwork, that we're working with those partners as well. And finally, that this is a journey of continuous improvement. This is not just a plan to put on the shelf. This is a living document, and it'll change as you learn more through surveys or feedback, all those good things. It's really important to remember that we need to adapt, and especially in this post-COVID climate where things are different than they were before. And I think things like in-person engagement are so much more important nowadays than they were perhaps before. So those are the guiding principles. Let's have a look what's inside the plan. Now, as I mentioned, there's 4 goals, there's 10 objectives, and a whole list of actions for each of them. And this is a sample of what the page looks like with the document. But let's take a closer look at what those goals and objectives are. So the first one clearly speaks to your strategic priority, which is about that meaningful two-way engagement with your community. We want to make sure things are, opportunities are planned, that they're predictable, that we're not being reactive. That will help us be proactive. We've recommended that you create a calendar of key events, not just events that are happening in the community like Summerfest, although I'll get to that in just a moment, but also the things that you're doing, like you've got the opening of your multi-use facility and those type of things. So all those kind of events that go into communicating the what you're doing. That you provide multiple opportunities using different channels that work for folks. And there's been an opportunity for you to look at with the Sunny South News to be able to do a direct mail to people's homes, recognizing that not everybody's on Facebook. And so having a look at that. As part of the guiding principles under the continuous improvement, one of the things that's recommended is to also look at pilot projects, because that is the opportunity to experiment and see how things go and see if you should continue or not. And I think that's a really important learning place for local governments to be, and that's certainly something that can be looked at with a pilot project with this direct mail. The other then is leveraging council's connections. No question, you are connected in the community, so how do we do that? How do we make that, use that in-person piece? And as I say, after COVID, people are craving that. First, I love the mayor's video, and I do thank you for the opportunity to share that example with other local governments. It's such a nice way to get a recap, a very informal recap in 8 to 14 minutes about what happened at council, and that you handle some important decisions as part of running a multi-million-dollar corporation. So it's a nice way to get that information. So how do we leverage that and get that into more, in front of more folks? And also event attendance. We clearly heard in the survey, and also the desire from council, was to be out there talking about what you're doing. Too often we create these plans and we have a newsletter, maybe we have a Facebook page, but I think that we're, again, craving and missing that opportunity for that in-person engagement. So what could that look like in terms of event attendance? Are there events like Summerfest that you would have a booth at, for example, and maybe you've got information about your latest engagement underway? Or maybe it's just a table at the dog park on a Saturday to see how things are going or get people's feedback on something. So looking at what those potential events are and feeding them back into that calendar of events so that you're planning that outreach and leveraging it as well. And then, of course, looking after your team, boosting the team with training, templates, and the like. Goal number 2, moving forward, is about building and strengthening those community relationships. Now, you have a number of those identified in your strategic priorities, working with your nonprofits as a way to provide better service. Supporting that with communications is critical. So looking at how that could be done is part of this as well. Responding first to requests for information and proactively managing those issues, looking at your systems and procedures around that. There's some recommendations around that. It's really important to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff and find out what's just the tip of the iceberg. What is something that we could do? And you think about the guiding principle of a community-first communications is really about looking at things from the lens of your audience, from the lens of your community. So making sure that you have the systems in place for that. Leveraging, again, as I said, those in-person conversations with the calendar of key events, and also closing the loop on that so that the feedback that you learn from those in-person engagements gets built back into the system. It's sort of like that continuous improvement piece as well. And then, of course, staying connected and working with your partners who are so valuable to service delivery, and a lot of times funding as well. Goal number 3 focuses specifically on the media. And that's about making sure that we can provide them, that the town can provide them, the information necessary to help them tell their story. And that's by having background information available. It's by having your folks ready to go and speak to them. It might be training, for example, for the mayor. You're pretty fluent at that, but maybe for your SMEs or your subject matter experts, where the media may want to talk to them and do a deeper dive into some of the topics that may be up for discussion. Also making sure that we're looking at that process for handling the misinformation that gets out there, and certainly we've seen a bit of a proliferation of that with social media and certainly through COVID. So making sure that we're monitoring that and correcting the incorrect along the way. So some strategies around that. And finally, about monitoring and measuring and doing that continuous improvement. Identifying, first off, what works best for the community. And this is about identifying the right channels. So one of the things that's suggested in the plan, for example, is to do a communication survey and find out, talk to your community and say, hey, what's the best way to reach you? And also, what's the best way for you to provide feedback? So looking at that data and then updating the plan so that you know these are the channels that we use to communicate with our community, and here's how it's working. The other thing that, and I just want to throw this out there, is that other communities have also grown their communication survey, so they might still do it annually or biannually, but they've also added on other things and made it more of a customer satisfaction survey, or citizen satisfaction survey, where you might also ask about different things like waste collection or parks and rec, and maybe change it up each year so a different topic is focused. And again, looping in that feedback from the in-person, from the online, all the things that we're hearing into improving it and making that journey continuous. Finally, we get into the tools, the tactics, and the timing, and this is really the nuts and bolts, all that stuff that we need to actually get this done. So there are a number of areas looking at when we talk about community first or being out front with folks, what does that community relations look like in terms of presentations? What are the materials that we need to support that? If we're going to be asking for feedback or input, what are the tools that we're going to use online or paper surveys or the Let's Connect website, for example? Media relations, are we sending out a news release or is this more something for social media? So how can we best work with our media to help them tell our story? And of course, paid advertising. What are we going to advertise and where? Looking at your websites, making sure that they are up to date. They're pretty good looking to begin with, but you have the two. You have the town of Coaldale, plus you have that great Let's Connect website as well to help people learn more about specific topics and host a conversation there, which is a fantastic platform. And finally, of course, social media, looking at how to best use that. So in the plan, it's laid out with each of these tools and tactics and methods, a description of each of those, and then we have what you can do in the short term and what you can do in the longer term. And this really gets down into the nuts and bolts and to how to deliver on some of these high-level goals and objectives. So that is the plan in a bit of a nutshell and a bit of an overview, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I'll open it up to council. Are there any questions or comments? As always, Jan, you do such a great job. They don't have any questions for you. Appreciate all your time and effort into this. So, question? Oh, okay. Okay, so Jan, I'll just let you stay online here. I'm just going to ask for someone to make a motion that council adopts the communication strategy for the 2021 to 2025 council term as presented. Councillor Saylor, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, so again, Jan, thank you very much and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Solutions with your communication.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're going to get back on track with our agenda. We're going to go to, under bylaws and policies, item 7.1 regarding the area structure plan bylaw 844-P-03-22 regarding the West Industrial Area Structure Plan, second and third reading, and Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth and Investment, will be presenting.
At this point, we've had ample opportunity through the public hearing process. That's fine. To discuss the proposed area structure plan. Obviously, we've heard some feedback through the public hearing process, specifically with respect to what one of the landowners within the defined boundary had raised with respect to concerns, and there was some discussion with council about appropriate measures for dealing with those concerns. And with consideration to the issues brought up by Mr. Beller as representing the land ownership group for that particular piece of land, when consider the needs for the plan area and consider some of the topics addressed, and also considering the developer, the principal proponent interested in streamlining the process for development. And with consideration of all that, obviously there's a preference for a single area structure plan that covers the entire quarter. But I think when you balance what some of the concerns were and what some of the solutions to those concerns would be with including Mr. Beller's property within that area, I think the simplest, most straightforward, and most expeditious and probably optimal solution to address that is simply to provide for some amendments to that area structure plan to potentially remove that property, and then some of the concerns that were addressed with respect to how municipal reserve would be impacted or what the size of stormwater pond on the property can be addressed by a plan prepared for that property by that property owner, whether that's next year or 20 years from now or whatever they choose to develop that piece. So with respect to that, if I might provide council with a recommendation, which would be somewhat altered from what was provided in the staff report, given what was presented at the public hearing, if that would be appropriate. So my recommendation would be that council table second and third reading of Area Structure Plan Bylaw 844-P-03-22 to the regular council meeting of May 9th. Further, that council direct administration to come back with an amended area structure plan which removes Lot 4, Block 1, Plan 1811388 from the plan area, and to make adjustments to the plan and policies accordingly prior to consideration of second reading.
Thank you, Cameron. Are there any questions for Cameron? Councillor Beekman?
Thank you, Mayor. So, Cameron, hypothetically, if we were to make that amendment, or if we were to go forth with removing Mr. Beeler's land, and he wants back in, what would be the scenario playing out in that case?
With respect to the question, so my assumption here is if that is passed, third reading is adopted, the area structure plan is adopted, and then Mr. Beeler wants to come in and develop for industrial purposes?
Yeah, that's correct.
So he would have to prepare an amendment to the area structure plan. He'd have to provide for consideration of those things that are provided for in this. So he'd probably need to show us where his stormwater is going to go. He'd need to create a plan for connection to a roadway, likely the roadway that has been developed adjacent to that property. There would be some public consultation associated with that. He'd need to provide for consideration of things like potentially a municipal reserve strip to provide for some buffering or some other policies accordingly. And he'd have to engage consultants in order to prepare that plan.
Okay, so to be clear, this wouldn't fall on the town of Coaldale to prepare that after, if that decision was made.
Thank you for the question. Certainly the town could do it. We're always have the ability to prepare an area structure plan for any property in town. But no, realistically, whether it's Mr. Beeler or a subsequent owner of that lot would identify that they're ready to move forward with more intensive development to convert it from an agricultural use, and that would start the point of them beginning consideration of developing their own, obviously substantially smaller plan. Likely, rather than a separate plan, it would simply be to amend the existing area structure plan to incorporate them into it, but that's almost semantics, realistically. Yeah.
Any further questions, Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Cam, speaking in favor of tabling. Just a further question to Cam, that two things. Number one, Mr. Beller would need to develop his own area structure plan in event. Mm-hmm. And second point would be the pond in and of itself. Would that be relocated in the meantime, is probably your thought process to the May 9th?
Thank you. Yeah, I think and provide for ISL to make the specific amendments to the plan, but realistically, you would look at likely, as I mentioned, a utility easement corridor along the eastern edge of the live electric parcel to allow for the utilities which were initially planned for along the western boundary of the storm pond area is moving over there so that they don't interfere with Mr. Beeler's agricultural use. The pond would shift north completely onto the property owned by the 845 developments. Would likely be a little bit smaller because now there's 14 or so acres that doesn't need to be factored into the calculation. The roadway network I don't anticipate would be substantially changed. I would still suggest to them that that roadway network would run adjacent to Mr. Baylor's property, and in the event that he were to develop for industrial purposes, if his lots are going to connect to that road, that he would pay for his portion of the road at that time. So realistically, there's not massive substantial changes. One of the issues, of course, is the provision of the way the plan called for potential buffering was for the landscaping of the parcels on the southern edge. And there was some discussion about perhaps doing municipal reserve there instead. The reality of whether we do municipal reserve there or whether we require landscaping is that wouldn't have actually physically occurred until development of Mr. Beeler's. We don't simply force him to provide us with a municipal reserve immediately because he's not part of the development process. And so realistically, that doesn't change because now that is an issue that will be decided when his plan is prepared. To address concerns for the folks to the south of the plan area, the reality here is that on the western side of things, you have the live electric site, which is developed for industrial use currently, and nothing is going to change on that lot in the short term. And for the rest of the portion, Mr. Beeler's lot is 110 meters in distance, and then there's another 20 meters of distance for the roadway. So it's 130, the development of the road will be occurring 130 meters to the north of station grounds. And so for reference of what 130 meters looks like, the area structure plan notification radius is 60 meters, right? And so this is more than double that minimum distance to even for notification of folks to include in the plan area. Now, as a matter of course, we would have notified the folks regardless, but we're talking about now having 130 meters of separation between the industrial area structure plan development area and the developments to the south. Those developments to the south are have industrial development directly adjacent to them now to the east. They are approximately 80 meters away from the industrial lots to the south along, I believe it's 18th Avenue. So the plan area that now that Mr. Baylor's property is removed from is now substantially further away from station grounds than a number of other industrial uses which are already there. So from that perspective, I think the concerns are fairly well addressed, but we'd need to incorporate minor changes to the policies for your consideration prior to adoption, and that's what I would task the consultants from ISL to do. And with respect to the recommendation, May 9th would be the goal. If for some reason that is not prepared, we would suggest that would be moved to the second meeting of May if required.
Deputy Mayor Avery.
A question for Cam. Is this going to delay the development if we don't do second and third reading tonight with amendments to the existing area structure plan, which would possibly have, where they could have been selling lots this fall, it's going to move it to next spring?
Very good question, Councillor Avery. Or Deputy Mayor Avery, there we go. It is my position that making the amendment to remove this one lot from the area structure plan is the course that allows for the fastest development, given the trade-off between keeping the land within and needing to then work through what I suspect would be a difficult negotiation with Mr. Baylor. So from that perspective, it's quicker. The idea of amending the document and passing second and third reading tonight, while that is certainly something we can do with a bylaw, the amount of work that would be required to craft the specifics of what that amendment would be, I would suggest we'd run the risk of getting it wrong. because the area structure plan document itself really needs to be amended. So I think that taking 2 weeks is reasonable, and I don't anticipate it would mean the difference between one construction season and another.
Councilor Chapman?
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Cam again, is just looking at the whole area structure plan. Like initially, I liked what was being planned. I liked that whole thing.
Yeah.
Now that we're cutting out or tentatively, amending this to exclude a southern portion of it, I'm just wondering if, in the spirit of the area structure plan, whether the advocate and the owner of those lands that are being desired to be excluded would continue to follow the spirit of development and sense that this could be a commercial industrial development there, or is he going to go off on a different course and maybe turn it into residential? Just a question that I need to ask.
Absolutely,
before.
and it's a fair question. So anyone is always free to ask for anything, right? People can apply to build a nuclear power plant across the street from a school, and then we have the opportunity to say no. The municipal development plan, the Annex A, all the documents that we have adopted that call for the planning of the community identify this as the industrial node and as the industrial growth. And so for someone to come forward with an area structure plan, for example, for residential development of that parcel, it would be very difficult for them to convince me to make a recommendation to you to adopt such a plan. They're certainly welcome to ask. It seems like it's a good way to burn $50,000 or more on planning fees. I wouldn't encourage anyone to pursue it. It's pretty clear the purpose of this quarter section is for industrial development, perhaps light industrial, or perhaps something on the cusp of industrial. But to come back with a residential application would be I think, a difficult pitch from their end. Mm-hmm.
Okay, any further questions? I'm just going to read back the motion that council table second and third reading of area structure plan bylaw 844-P-03-22 to the regular council meeting of May 9th. Further, that council direct administration to come back with an amended area structure plan which removes lot 4, block 1, plan 1811388 from the plan area and to make adjustments to the plan policies accordingly prior to the consideration of second reading. Does anybody care to sponsor that motion? Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And Cam, don't go away. You're going to be up again here for agenda item 7.2 to consider a second and third reading of bylaw 845-P-03-22 to amend the land use bylaw 67P-0403 to rezone certain lands within the West Industrial Area Structure Plan area from urban reserve to industry and highway commercial C2.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Once again, we've had an opportunity to speak quite a bit to this issue, and in fact, what I'm going to propose is a recommendation that fundamentally mirrors the last one. So administration's recommendation on this will simply be to remove the one lot from the equation, makes in fact the rezoning relatively simple because it will only apply to the lands owned by 845 Developments. And so the recommendation would be that council table second and third reading of rezoning bylaw 845-P-03-22 to the regular council meeting of May 9th. And further, that council direct administration to amend rezoning bylaw 845-P-03-22 to remove lot 4, block 1, plan 1811388 from the area before consideration of second reading at the May 9th, 2022 regular meeting of council.
Good job.
And just to speak to that, with respect to a question that Deputy Mayor Avery asked with respect to timing of things, there's less of a rush on the rezoning side of things because the area structure plan needs to be adopted prior to the outline plans and a number of other important work that needs to be done. Rezoning needs to happen prior to subdivision and lot sales being created. So there's not really a sense of urgency necessarily with the rezoning, but I think doing it at the same time as the area structure plan makes a lot of sense. That's my position.
Okay, last chance for questions. Seeing none, could I get someone to sponsor the motion? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 7.3. Pardon me? No, this is something different. So agenda item 7.3, borrowing bylaw 850-B-04-22, line of credit, all three readings. Kyle, our CFO, is going to present. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, thank you. Yep, so in front of council we have the borrowing bylaw 850-B-04-22. Previously, the Town of Coaldale Council approved bylaw 803-B-02-21. When we went to formalize this line of credit with BMO, we noticed that there was an error in the borrowing bylaw regarding the interest rate referenced, the maximum interest rate that the town can pay under the borrowing bylaw. Previous borrowing bylaw had approved bank prime rate less 0.25%, when the firmly quoted rate from BMO should have been just prime rate. This error was a result of a kind of a transfer between our banking manager at the time and kind of miscommunication in there. I'm going to just touch base on the background of the bylaw and what administration is seeking the bylaw for. Currently, the Town of Coaldale doesn't have a line of credit bylaw or access to a line of credit. The intention of this is just to use this or have this available to the Town of Coaldale in case of emergencies or extenuating circumstances. This borrowing bylaw isn't intended to be used for day-to-day operations, nor is it expected to have any financial impact on the Town of Coaldale for daily operations as a result. $4 million was selected as the desired amount for this, as it represents approximately 3 months of cash flow for the town's operating expenses, and is kind of the benchmark that their similar municipalities have used for similar circumstances. So at council's discretion tonight, council can either proceed with first reading and defer second and third readings should they choose, proceed with all 3 readings of the bylaw, or request further information from administration before proceeding. That being said, I'll turn it back to council for any questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions for our CFO? Go ahead, Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Kyle, just out of curiosity, we are in a pretty good cash position. Has this line of credit been used since it came into play? It was about a year ago that line of credit was introduced.
It hasn't been used. The town actually it's not set up yet. So when the bylaw was previously approved and we put in the application to BMO, we have to submit the bylaw allowing the application to go through. And at that time, they noticed that there was an error in the bylaw regarding the rate. So it was never formally set up at that time. It's just kind of been sitting on the back burner for a couple months. And that's why we're bringing back to town council to get reviewed again and possibly set up. So it's not currently in place, or we do not have access to it at the moment.
Any other questions? I have one for you, Kyle. So when this has to be enacted for whatever reason, will this be brought to council's attention?
If that's a request of council, we can definitely do that. There isn't any strict guidance on, I guess, establishment of what would follow that, what would trigger that. But if that's a direction of council, we can definitely implement that and make sure council's aware of any time it's used.
Will that require a friendly amendment to the bylaw, or is that just a gentleman thing that we can do between us?
I would just take that as a gentleman's agreement between us.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So I'm still not in favor of this, wasn't in favor of it when it was first initiated. As Councillor Beekman said, we're in a strong position financially, and I can't figure why we would need a $4 million line of credit. We say the financial impact is 3 months of operation expenses, but yet we say we're not going to use it for operational. During an emergency event, municipal affairs always comes in and opens up their pocketbook for flooding, fires, tornadoes, whatever your event may be, because they're not going to see any community within our province get into a financial pinch. So I just cannot see. We've got all these other debt loads that were sent to us last week. I just don't know why we would want to put a free $4 million debt load onto our ratepayer. So I will be voting against the motion when it comes through, or however it comes through, because I don't think we are in a financial position that we need to get the line of credit.
Thank you. Kyle, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the comment. My response to that is it's just us as administration looking as ways to be prepared in case of the unknown circumstance. We did see, we haven't had the need to use this in many years, but, COVID was one of the things that changed, that we realized that events can happen and we just want to be prepared. This doesn't cost the town anything to be prepared. So administration's viewpoint is it's just ensuring that we're ready in case we ever need to, and it adds no cost to the residents or the town of Coaldale.
Thank you. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Kyle, or I guess, I don't know if this goes through to him. I'd like to request that the vote's recorded when the time comes.
Thank you. Kalen.
Mayor, just one comment to add to the discussion. We are in a strong financial position, but we also have a lot of the money that are in cash reserves locked into investments that are 60, 90, 120. And so although we have a strong financial position, it's not as simple as cashing some of the funds that are locked into different accounts. So if council is concerned about the use, the goal is never to use this unless it's an emergency. And council is also able to make a resolution on top of passing the bylaw, indicating that council approval needs to be required in order to utilize the funds of this line of credit if that's the concern. But just rounding out the financial position comment, we can still be in a strong position but have our funds locked in. And sometimes in an emergency, it's not as easy to get the funds if they're in GICs, for instance.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I would like to express respect for your question about the friendly
amendment.
Friendly amendment. And I think what we need to do is establish that the council has clear purview of what is being borrowed, and that it may be made clear. So I would want to see that in the bylaw, and I'll make first reading for that bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Just before we call the question on that, Deputy Mayor Abry, if we do what our CAO recommends, where we have that built in, and to build on what Councillor Chapman said, that before it was ever used, it would have to come to council first. We would just have it in place, like Kaylin said, in a case of an emergency that we needed to access money. And if you have to find money in a short term, then we might be in a difficult position to do that quickly, based on our cash, cash flow projections, and the fact that a lot of those are locked in. So if we were to do that, would you reconsider your stand?
And unfortunately, no, I won't, because you can go to your supplier if you're in a cash crunch and say, hey, I need another 30 days. If you know you've got a $2 million GIC coming out in 30 days or 60 days. I just don't think, I as I mentioned, I looked at our what we've got and what we're paying annually, and it would be nice to pay those down. And if we're going to take out $4 million and pay off $4 million worth of debt at a lower rate, I would definitely be in favor of it. But to say we're going to borrow $4 million at prime or prime plus a quarter, you know, I don't see the need financially for our town.
Okay, so just further to your comment with the GICs, like you know, that's most, if not all, are locked in, so that we cannot cash those in short-term notice.
I think we were told 30, 60, 90 days, so that's not short. You know, that's pretty short term in the long scheme of investment.
Okay, so then let me throw this at you then. What happened if we were at the 120-day mark and we needed to pay for something? Like all it is a backstop to help us. It's another tool in Kyle's toolbox that, again, it won't be utilized until it comes to council to get approved.
I guess I'm just feel we've spent enough, and I realize it's a backstop, but a backstop is sometimes easily accessible funds, just like a credit card is easy accessible funds, and I just don't want to put our residents in that situation.
Again, it's just a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Chapman to, oh, sorry, Councillor Beekman.
Sorry, a question about that, whether it be to Kyle or Kaylin here. In the event of an emergency, let's say the bylaw doesn't pass, and in the event of an emergency, could there not be a special council meeting called to pass a borrowing bylaw for the event of an emergency? Is there not a method of expediting the process if it was needed, rather than having a floating $4 million line of credit?
That's definitely an option. You have to consider though too, if council does pass a bylaw, it does take time from the financial institution to have that set up and established, which depending on the need, you know, there could be timing delay of that. You know, this just to be clear, we're not actually borrowing anything as part of this. It's just having the funds available to us. So this doesn't cost us anything today, but I definitely do understand and appreciate the concerns associated with it.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Councillor Chapman, you have your mic on.
Make the motion.
Okay.
For
So I'll call the question on Councillor Chapman's motion that council proceed with first reading of borrowing bylaw 850-B-04-22. Any further discussion? Sorry, Kaylin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick clarification. Councillor Reese mentioned her desire for a recorded vote. I just wanted to make sure that was the case before the resolution was made.
Okay, point taken. Any discussion on Councillor Chapman's motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed is Deputy Mayor Avery, Councillor Pickering, and Councillor Beekman. First reading is passed. Can I get someone to sponsor a motion that council proceed with second reading borrowing bylaw 850-B-04-22? Councillor Reese. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Deputy Mayor Avery, Councillor Pickering, and Councillor Beekman are opposed. And we'll just go through the motion here that council moved to provide, the last motion was passed. Now we move on to that council moved to provide unanimous consent to provide all three readings in one meeting for borrowing bylaw 850-B-04-22. Can I get someone to sponsor that motion? Councillor Saylor, any further discussion? All those, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Deputy Mayor Avery, Councillor Pickering, and Councillor Beekman opposed. So we're the resolution is defeated then. Okay, thank you. And we're going to record the votes on that. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7.4. This is the one that I'm going to be abstaining from. The land use bylaw amendment bylaw 848-P-04-22, first reading, and Melanie Messier, our town planner, is going to present.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wait for him to step. Do I have to wait for you to step? Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So to provide some context of where the area is situated for council, the subject parcel is located along 18th Avenue. It's in the northeast industrial area and is surrounded by Industry I zoning and is predominantly surrounded by industrial development. The initial rezoning took place in 2002, where the parcel was rezoned from Industry I to Commercial C1 to allow for public assembly. The parcel now has a new landowner, and they are requesting a rezoning to bring it back to the initial zoning of Industry I to allow for the property to be used for broader industrial uses. It is the position of staff that the rezoning will bring the property into conformance with the municipal development plan, where 18th Avenue is primarily zoned and projected to operate as an industrial corridor. As required by the Municipal Government Act, once the public hearing is set, notice of the rezoning will be advertised in the Sunny South News for 2 consecutive weeks. It will also be posted on Let's Connect Coaldale, and notices will be sent out to neighboring landowners. So with that, council is respectfully requested to vote on first reading of Bylaw 848-P-04-22 and to set the public hearing date and time as May 24th, 2022 at 5:05 p.m. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Melanie. Do we have any questions for Mel? I'm seeing none. Can I get someone to make a motion? Councillor Beekman.
I'll make the motion that council provide first reading of amended land use bylaw 848-P-04-22 and set the public hearing date for May 24th, 2022 at 5:05 p.m.
Thank you. We've got a motion on the table. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. 6 votes. And please note that Councillor or Mayor Van Rijn was not in.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Abry. Moving on to agenda item 7.5, the Municipal Reserve Designation Bylaw 849-P-04-22, and Melanie is going to be presenting again on that one.
Thank you, Mayor. So the following report is to present council with a bylaw to designate the lands legally described as Lot 5, Block 12, Plan 6476AA as municipal reserve. To provide some background, in September of 2021, the town entered into a land donation agreement with the owner of the subject parcel, where a condition was agreed upon to designate the land as municipal reserve and to develop the land in a manner that would benefit the general public in the form of a walkway, a public green space, or a general amenity. So within the Municipal Government Act, Section 665, subsection 1, it states that council may, by bylaw, require that a parcel of land be designated as municipal reserve. Additional steps in finalizing the agreement, should council wish to approve the bylaw, includes that registering any necessary caveats on the new certificate of title and developing the lands with the design preferences of the or that are approved by the donor happen before any changes are made. It is worth mentioning that a condition of the agreement is to install a memorial plaque inscribed with the donor's late parents and grandparents, which will be honored once the development is complete. So no advertisement is necessary for the designation of municipal reserve. Alternatively, the Municipal Government Act outlines that a public hearing is required in the sale, lease, or disposal of existing municipal reserve. So with that being said, council may wish to consider all three options outlined in the staff report, with the staff recommendation that council provide all three readings of the municipal reserve designation bylaw, 849-P-04-22, and approve the designation of Lot 5, Block 12, Plan 647-6AA as municipal reserve. And lastly, I'll just finish with that this land was donated by the Yip family, and I just wanted for that to be known on record.
Thank you. And that used to be called the Club Cafe back in the day.
Wow.
Okay, not that I'm that old. I just I looked it up. I'll open up the floor for any questions for Mel. I just have a comment on this agenda item and the previous one too. Besides putting all the lot block information down, can you put the civic address down too?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay, perfect. Okay, can I get Deputy Mayor Avery?
You read my mind. I just would like to move first reading of the land designation bylaw.
Okay. Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Can I get someone to sponsor second? Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And can I get someone to make a motion for unanimous consent? Councillor Pickering. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And third and final reading, Councillor Reese. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mel. Okay, moving on to item 8.2, the 2022 tax rate going to be presented by our Chief Financial Officer and Deputy CEO, Kyle Beauchamp. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, thank you again. So the objective of this meeting is to discuss with council options for the tax rate for 2022. Looking at the kind of the calendar of events, how we'll proceed here is looking to get a little direction from council tonight. As we did pass the budget the previous year, that was scheduled for a 1.72% tax increase. As part of that, though, council does have at their discretion the ability to set the non-residential, so the commercial and industrial tax rate, at a different percentage increase than residential, so you don't have to go, say, 1.72 across the board. Following tonight's discussion at the subsequent council meeting, we will be bringing back first reading of the tax rate bylaw to council for consideration, followed by second and third readings at the second meeting in May. So part of the previously approved 2022 budget, council approved a 1.72% tax increase. At that time, we had estimated the growth in assessment, to which those numbers came back slightly higher, to which we're now looking at a 1.35% tax increase. So when we're considering a tax increase, we also need to consider inflationary changes to the market. So even though if a tax rate, for example, the tax rate, if it does not change, it could still be subject to a tax rate based on inflationary changes. So as council can kind of see on the slide here, from Benchmark Consultants, when they presented a few weeks ago, the average inflationary increase for a residential market was 0.6%. So what this means is that on average throughout the town of Coaldale, property assessments for residential will increase by 0.6%. That means if council held the residential tax rate as same as last year with no change, that would be the equivalent of a 0.6% tax increase. And if you can go to the next page. We consider the same approach for non-residential as well. However, kind of the data is a little skewed here, as council can see that overall the inflationary change for non-residential came out to 1.9%. But looking at this demographic here, or the graphic here, is that the majority of the properties actually experience a slight decrease or a negative percent change, while only a small amount of properties on the overall basis incurred an inflationary change. So based on this, to apply a 1.9% inflationary across the board can somewhat be a little inaccurate based on the how the data actually came out. And if you can keep going to the next page. When considering tax rates, council should also consider a tax strategy. So here is a slide from the budget discussions that we had back in December with council. So what we do, we have a few comparables here. These are all for 2021 tax rates. You will see where the town of Coaldale sits for the residential tax rate. You will see where the town of Coaldale sits for the non-residential tax rate. And an important figure to look at is the split between non-residential and residential. So this basically shows that compared to our comparables, similar sized municipalities or surrounding municipalities, that Coaldale does have a smaller non-residential compared to residential rate. It's administration's recommendation that council consider increasing the non-residential rate ratio, which would mean increasing the non-residential rate at a higher rates than your residential taxes. You can see that this will kind of put the balance at a little more even level, as the non-residential is lower compared to our comparables, with the residential somewhat in the middle there compared to our competitors.
Before you change that slide, can I just ask a question?
You sure can.
So for our viewers at home, what does that number mean? So Coaldale 8.0628.
So that means for every $100,000 of assessed property that you have on your residential house, the ratepayer will pay $8 and $8.062 in property tax. So if you have a property that is, for example, valued at $100,000, the tax rate on that for the year would just be over $800.
And then when you change those numbers to a percentage, like how much lower or higher is Coaldale's residential tax rate compared to, let's use Lethbridge?
Sure, exactly. So when we're looking at the city of Lethbridge compared to the town of Coaldale on the residential aspect of it, the town of Coaldale is roughly 8.5% lower than the city of Lethbridge for municipal property taxes. When comparing that on a non-residential basis, the town of Coaldale is less than half of Lethbridge, which turns out to about 115% lower than the city of Lethbridge on a non-residential basis. So you can see here that when comparing just to Lethbridge, our gap on the residential side is fairly close to Lethbridge, but there is a larger gap comparing the non-residential compared to the city of Lethbridge. So that goes back to that non-residential residential ratio that council should be considering as part of our tax strategy for the town of Coaldale, is that that ratio is again fairly low compared to our competitors. Looking at the city of Lethbridge, it is half of the city of Lethbridge. So a good strategy to help consider that is to again raise your commercial and your industrial taxes at a higher basis point than your effect on your residential taxes, should council want to consider that option.
Thank you.
So essentially, where we are here is just kind of looking for maybe some, we can bring back some options to council to consider at the next council meeting for first reading, but kind of getting a sense of some direction from town council is where we might want to go for the tax rate here. If we held even for I'm just going to pick this one because it's the simplest. If Town of Coaldale held even on the residential mill rate and didn't change, again, the only tax impact is the inflationary change. So residents would be looking at a 0.6% tax increase. To make the balance of the balance up for the budget, that would be the equivalent to a 3.44% non-residential tax increase. That would essentially move the mill rate from 9.92% to 10.26, which would still put us below Blackfalds there on the comparison and definitely below the majority of the comparators there. So I can bring back more options for council to consider, but just kind of give a general feel of where council may want to proceed with.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Avery has a question.
Thank you. So do you know how many of those non-residential would have a machinery tax plus that?
To my knowledge, Tabor does. I know the city of Lethbridge does not. I don't anticipate many of the smaller ones like Colhurst, Fort McLeod, Raymond having them because they simply don't have the business there. Tabor largely has it because of the sugar plant. But I can't say with certainty, but I believe majority of them do not.
Okay. And then our residential, our levy is not factored into ours, correct?
You're correct. So that is just the municipal taxes. It doesn't consider the recreation levy.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
And just following up on Deputy Mayor Avery's question, most of those municipalities that are above us, actually all of them, except for Innisfail, have a higher industry rate historically. So I think they're obviously in a stronger position that way. And second to that is that I think even raising it, the non-residential side from our end, just even tiny would still keep us in a competitive advantage as a municipality. I think that's important. On the residential side, my question to you is with regards to assessment. Benchmark would probably have an idea as to exactly what the assessment level would be for Coaldale, right? So is it increased quite substantially from 2021?
Yes, the increase, the assessment value has increased. For example, if we're just looking at residential, last year our residential assessment was $908 million versus this year it is up to $922 million. So that's an increase of $14 million on the residential aspect. If we're just looking at non-residential, last year it was $134 million versus this year we are up to $145 million. So that's an increase of what, 11 and change million there. So you can see based on the percentage that the residential went up 14 million approximately when the non-residential went up 11 million. And the proportion of that is quite high for the residential compared to for the non-residential increase compared to residential. So that shows that Coaldale's assessment base for non-residential is increasing at a substantially larger figure than our residential, which is always a good tax strategy.
Rebuttal that will affect obviously their taxes at the end too, right? So really when when we get the phone calls, it's because their assessment and their taxes have gone up. It's generally because their assessment went up considerably. That's really where the hit comes.
So the increase in the assessment is partly twofold, right? So one is from new growth and development. So in just speaking to residential, as more neighborhoods and more houses get built, that's growth and development. And the second phase is that inflationary growth. And that goes back to the previous slide where we saw the inflationary growth for residential was 0.6%. So on average, if averages were perfect, every new residential property would increase by 0.6% in the town of Coaldale. And that goes back to the point of maintaining the mill rate the exact same way it is would be the equivalent of that, a 0.6% tax increase, if that follows.
Okay, thank you. So if you could just go over one more time now what you're going to bring back to the May 9th meeting for us for options.
Sure. So what we can do for options is one, the simplest thing, but perhaps not the most effective, is to make the tax increase consistent across the board between residential and non-residential, so they increase at the same percentage base. As a baseline perspective for measure option number 2, we will bring back that town council maintain the residential mill rate at the current level it is, with the offsetting tax increase higher for the non-residential to cover that. And possibly a third option is we can bring back a 2-to-1 split. So if our residential increases by $1, we can increase the residential by $2. So those are probably the 3 best options that we could bring back if that's sufficient to council, but I'm definitely open to hear any other options council might want to consider.
Any comments on what Kyle just shared? Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you. I like the option of keeping our residential at a 0 and then looking at the non-residential, so we start getting that into comparison with everybody else, and then it helps our ratio quite a bit too.
Just to clarify, when you say 0, you mean no change in the rate?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Can I get someone to make a motion to adopt Kyle's report for information? Councillor Beekman, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, you're still up. We're going to move on to item 9.1. And it's regarding the Canadian Award for Financial Reporting. And, well, Kyle, you want to explain your objective, please?
Sure. So this marks the 3rd consecutive year. This is just kind of an information update for council. 3rd consecutive year, the town of Coaldale has received the Canadian Award for Financial Reporting, awarded by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada. This award was received for our 2020 annual report. Just for the viewers at home, the annual report is essentially our financial statements, followed by various pages of commentary and information as to what happened for the town of Coaldale during the year, basically from the financial viewpoint. So this award, essentially what we do is we take our annual report each year and we submit it to our GFOA association into the United States. It's reviewed by various colleagues and people associated with the GFOA to ensure that it meets various regulatory reporting requirements and information required into the report. And once they review it and determine if they pass it or not, they give us the good news or the bad news. And so again, this is the 3rd year in a row we've received the award. And Lana, if you scroll down, there is a picture I've attached just for council here. So this is the plaque that we received in the mail actually a couple weeks ago. So it's once we're in the new Civic Square, we'll find a nice place to hang it. But again, you can see we received it 2018, 2019, and 2020. So we've been very successful in this past couple years. And for anybody who is curious on this, would like to see more information or exactly what's in the annual report, all this is stored on our website at coaldale.ca/annual report. With that, I'll turn it back to council for any comments.
Thank you, Kyle. The last time I was in your office, every wall that you have in your room is bare, so you got lots of room to put that up. So Congratulations to you and your team. Appreciate all your hard work on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we'll do something with John as far as social media on that for us. Okay, perfect. Yes, please. Okay, so Councillor Chapman makes a motion to accept Kyle's report for information. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 10.1, council and committee reports. I drew the short straw this time. So the Mayors and Reeves committee that I sit on, and then Councillor Chapman is also on that committee as the Highway Twinning Association. So we meet the first Friday of every month. We've been doing it virtually, but now we're into a hybrid system where people that have to travel long distances, they can Zoom in through a facilitator that, and they have this neat device called the OWL where they can log into it, and then they can see everybody in the room, and then they can hear the discussion, and we can see them on their Zoom line as well. There are 72 municipalities, counties, and MDs and villages that are part of that. And we also have our MPs from Medicine Hat, Cardston, Warner. We have Foothills, Lethbridge, Bow River, Livingston, McLeod, Lethbridge West. And we normally have a fairly good turnout for the meeting. And the purpose of the meeting, of the group, I should say, is that Mayors and Reeves from across southern Alberta meet to discuss issues that affect their municipalities and collectively agree on solutions to issues that arise. And I spoke with our chairman for the group and our executive assistant, and they do not currently have a set of terms of reference for that group or bylaws. So they checked with the last chairperson. Lauren Hickey used to be the chair, and no one seems to know where any of that information is. So I asked them if they could bring that up at a meeting so that we can get those put back into place again. So, Councillor Chapman, you have any comments on that committee? Okay. Any questions? Okay. Perfect. So then that concludes the public portion of the meeting. We'll be moving into closed session, so I'll require a motion that council move into closed session at 8:27 p.m. in accordance with Section 197-2 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for item 13.1, subject to FOIP Section 16, third-party business interests, and item 13.1 and 13.2, subject to FOIP Section 17, third-party personal privacy. Could I get someone to sponsor that motion, please? Councillor Pickering. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break, please.